literally hundreds of years old mahogany. Big monsters. They weighed 470 pounds empty.
I saw it on TV afterwards, and they had it.
I remember sitting down in 140 that next day. I don't know, I guess it was Sunday when they were burying him, right?
Yeah.
And they said, here comes the big bronze casket. And I said, nah, it's mahogany. And everybody looked around at me like, what do you mean? Where's Sir Weck at?
I called his office. He probably left. He was going to be meeting up with this gentleman coming up from 10. Okay, you can just look. You can look right at me when you.
Okay, my name's Floyd Riebe, and I was a medical photography student at Bethesda, Maryland, at the Kennedy assassination autopsy.
My name's Jerrol Custer. I was the X-ray technician staff on duty that night, and I took the X-ray, post-mortem X-rays on John F. Kennedy. My basic mission that night was to find bullet fragments.
Dennis David, I was first-class hospital corpsman, chief of the day, senior enlisted man on watch the night of the assassination, Naval Medical School.
My name is Paul O'Connor. I was hospital corpsman, 3rd class. I was a student in clinical laboratory and blood bank school. My duty station that night was in the morgue, where I assisted on the autopsy of the president.
My name is Jim Jenkins. I also was a 3rd class hospital corpsman, and my duties were basically the same as Paul, to assist with the autopsy. I was also a labs in the medical laboratory school there.
Okay,
Are we roll? I can't see the deck. So no, the deck, the monitor deck.
No.
I just want to make sure we roll.
Yeah, we are.
Are you rolling now?
Yes.
I guess it was around 5 or 5:15 when Ledbetter, who was chief of the Naval Hospital, called me and told me there was a group of people up. And it turned out to be Secret Service. That we had heard on the radio shortly before that the body was going to be brought in for autopsy. And I told Boswell, I said, well, it looks like we're in for one hell of a night. Then, at a later, don't hold me on the times, seems to me it was around 6:30, give or take. I got a call, they said, he's on his way. Get some people to offload the casket. So I called Building 140, told the man on duty, I said, send me 3 men. That was the Naval Medical School barracks. And I called the Naval Dental School duty officer, said, send me 3 men. And I took the 6 of them down, and we offloaded gray shipping casket, and they took it into the morgue. And shortly, and after that, came in off of a black hearse, and I went back up front. And 25 minutes later, I was standing on the 2nd deck of the rotunda, watching the front entrance of the Naval Medical School with Mrs. Kennedy and the Secretary of Defense and several other officials came through the door.
Paul, why don't we start with you next?
Well, approximately, I thought it was around 8 o'clock that I logged him into the morgue log. But he came in, like I said, in the grayish, pinkish shipping casket. I call it shipping casket. Was opened up. Inside was a body bag. Unzipped the body bag and took the unclothed body of the president and put him on the table. He had a sheet wrapped around his midsection. Wasn't that right, Jim? Or towels, or and a bloody sheet wrapped around his head. We removed that sheet and observed a massive head wound that encompassed, about this much of his skull was blown away.
I really not much help as far as removing the body from the casket and so forth, because I was in the morgue and they had to come through an atrium type situation. I had a fleeting remembrance of the head of the casket coming through the double doors from out in the hallway. At that time, it was a grayish brown type.
And when they delivered the body, there was some comment made at the time that they had brought him up on 16th Street to avoid traffic and for security, quote unquote, purposes. And someone, standing around, said, well, they're afraid they were going to kidnap the body or something. And he said, no, for security purposes and to avoid the crowds and all the morbid seekers. And that was while, during that period of time that we offloaded him from the hearse during that period.
Now you hear stories of helicopters, you know, the sound of helicopters.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I heard helicopters.
How do you relate that to the overall situation at that time?
Well, I assumed he came in by helicopter. I just couldn't see that they would take the body of the president, put him in the marked ambulance, clear down in Andrews Air Force Base and drive him 30 miles all the way through Washington, D.C. when everybody knew he was coming up
And I
there.
also assumed that too, because I remember something about it. They said that he's coming in by helicopter.
After I got it, when I was back up front, and just moments or a few minutes before Mrs. Kennedy came in the front door, there was a helicopter that landed on the pad out there. As you come in on the entrance to Bethesda, the helicopter was up, the pad was up there.
Right north end.
I suspect, or I believe that was probably when the official escort, the soldier, sailor, marine escort for the body arrived on the heli. Because by that time we'd already offloaded the casket in the back. But there was a helicopter that landed at that time. And that was probably 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes before the entourage pulled up in front of Bethesda. And that was a mass chaos that night. Anyone's ever been there, that whole area in front of Bethesda was one massive sea of humanity. I remember looking out the window, and from the edge of the driveway in front of the hospital, all the way to Wisconsin Avenue, all over that. Remember the Bethesda Springs out there?
Right, in the middle.
That whole area. I don't remember what hole it was on the golf course, but it was literally covered with people, literally. Lake County Sheriff, Maryland Police, Washington D.C. Police lining both sides of the runway. It was
See,
really,
one thing though, you gotta remember, I had already x-rayed Kennedy before the entourage arrived. I had taken a full set of films. And on my way back upstairs to the x-ray department to process the films, because there was no processor in the morgue, we had to go up to the tower. And we had an FBI escort. And as we were coming down to the rotunda, this is when the entourage come in, and we were stopped. First thing the FBI guy turned around and said to me, he said, just don't say nothing, I want nobody to know what you're doing. And as soon as they went past and went up into the towers, there was an elevator as soon as you come out, came down the entourage and into the rotunda. The elevator sat on the side here, on the left-hand side as you're looking towards the main entrance of the hospital. We stopped there, the entourage went in, went up to the towers. As soon as everybody was gone, we went down the further end of the hall, got on the elevator, and went up to the x-ray department, and I processed the films.
you must have been static. You must have been right underneath me when I was
Yeah, I
static.
was. And this is one little thing that didn't quite gel. The president was already there, and supposedly he was supposed to be in the entourage, or the procession that was so-called getting there.
Well, if you saw the procession in your mind arrive, you know, at the very beginning of the evening at that point in time, then the casket that was part of that entourage, did any of you gentlemen time it in any other part of the building shortly after that, or what
Well,
happened?
at that time, you gotta remember what was going on. Your mind was actually on what you were doing. And it wasn't brought all together until later, until people actually realized what was going on. I didn't know that the casket was supposed to be with Jacqueline Kennedy at that time. Until later, I found out what this gentleman had saw and what everything else had occurred.
At 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, there were a bunch of us down in the cafeteria. And they said, hey, did you know there was 2 caskets? You know, there was the big bronze casket. And I hadn't seen TV. I didn't have time that night to see TV. It wasn't until the next day, a couple days later, that I saw the newscasts. But we were kicking around. I said, hey, he came in a gray shipping casket. But they said, but the big bronze casket was still in the gray Navy ambulance out front. Well, it was a black hearse that we took him off of, or that took the gray shipping casket out of.
Well, did any of you see this bronze ornamental casket later on in the evening?
I never did, no.
I never did.
No.
I saw the gray one. I saw the shipping
So
casket.
you never saw it in the morgue proper at all?
No.
And a different casket was brought in at the end of the evening to place the president's body in?
Right, it was a mahogany and Marcellus casket. Marcellus is the name brand of the casket.
It came from the funeral home there in Bethesda.
Yeah, Galler.
Drop.
See, you gotta remember what was going on that night. There was so many brass there. There was so much confusion. And you had Boswell and Humes both on working. You had
Stover.
Ebersol was there, and who
Stover.
else?
Stover was there. Kenny was there.
And there,
Kennedy, yeah.
I mean, everybody was there. And I'm trying to take x-rays, and when you're taking x-rays, you have to maintain a sort of safety area, because that's radiation that you're shooting. And I'm shooting like 14, 15 x-rays on the president's body, and it was like one right after another, and I made at least 3 trips back to the department. And each time I went up and came back, up and came back.
What happened to the x-rays after you took them?
As soon as I brought a set of x-rays back, they were placed up on a viewer, and Dr. Ebersol took care of them. But he was the one that was basically directing me what to take and what not to take.
And he was being directed also. And actually what the feeling that I got was that, you know, I was helping place the cassettes and so forth and turn the body and that type of thing. And I had gotten the impression that the people, someone in the gallery, whoever it was, did not think that we knew what we were doing. I didn't. I was not an x-ray tech, but the people who were taking the x-rays and the people who were at that point in time telling them what x-rays they wanted to take. So at that point in time was the first time that I saw Dr. Ebersol come into the morgue. And then he, as he said, he was directing what was to be taken and what was going on at that time. He, he had taken over at that point in time.
You took a couple of strange shots, didn't you?
Well, I don't remember exactly because, again, like I said, I wasn't familiar with x-ray. All I was doing was that when they asked me to, turn the body this way or help set the body up or that type of stuff, then I assisted with that. I know at one time, I think you gave me a lead apron.
Right.
And then someone else had backed off because they didn't have one, and somebody was trying to get the people in the gallery to back off, and they moved back just a couple of steps, but they weren't going anywhere, so.
Nobody was going anywhere.
So it didn't make any difference. We were shooting
Everybody
anyway.
had mass confusion. It was,
I think that, my feeling had gotten to me, and I've said this before, is that the tension, and it was kind of an animosity type thing. I got the feeling when we were looking with the x-rays that we weren't finding what they wanted us to find. And we weren't finding anything. So again, like I said, that was the impression that I'd gotten from the whole thing, is that it was being, and the whole autopsy was kind of being silently, if you will, directed from a group of people at the end of the gallery.
Well, I think also Admiral Berkeley was in there.
Yes, he was.
He was
there all the time.
All the time.
Berkeley used to swing a damn wide stick when he was sitting
Well,
there.
he was
President
the most agitated person I've ever seen in there that
Yeah.
night.
Yeah, he was, but there were, he wasn't the only one. There were a couple of people, and of course, all I knew were that, they were admirals, and I saw some colonels and some generals, and...
There was an Air Force general.
Right, and then there was an Army general.
And both of them were surgeons. They were both the Surgeon General of their respective services. Kenny was there, Berkeley was there, Stover was there. I remember seeing all of those people, because I escorted some of them down there later.
but the funny part about it is, in the chairman report, there was no high-ranking officers there. Were they disappeared?
Well, that was my next question is, we're given the feeling that the autopsy was pretty much run by Dr. Humes and Dr. Boswell.
No.
No, absolutely not.
No, it wasn't, and if they say, I don't know what ranks higher than a general or an admiral in the Navy. If that's not a high-ranking officer in the Navy, I don't know what else is. And I know for a fact that Dr. Galloway was there. He was there, and the Surgeon General was there, and Berkeley was there. And then there were other, like I said, there were some, there was a, I guess he must have been Air Force then, but at least he was a brigadier general.
In the subsequent time after that, when sometime later I moved up as worked in Captain Stover's office, more or less as his personal secretary for he and Commander Parker, who was the XA. And I was there when Boswell retired. And now I may be the only one with that impression, but my impression that Boswell resigned, a lot of it had to do that he was not able to make an honest, ethical report of the autopsy procedures, but that it was dictated the way it was going to be.
Something else that that we tend to hear about is, in a military operation like this, to have people who are plainclothes people in that kind of situation. Is that unusual, or because it was the president?
In this situation, I don't think it was unusual. I think that everybody was there protecting themselves. At least that was the impression I got. The FBI wasn't necessarily getting along with the Secret Service, and the Secret Service wasn't necessarily getting along with, with the military escorts and honor guards and those type of things. I know that at times Paul was standing behind Dr. Humes and Dr. Fink, and two people in suits, and we have no way of knowing whether they were FBI or Secret Service.
They were the cyber domain.
Yeah, whomever they were. They came up behind him, and I think they virtually crowded him out of his spot. One of the things I think people have to realize is that Paul and myself both had to stay within earshot. I mean, we had to be able to hear what Dr. Boswell, Dr. Fink, and Dr. Humes were saying, because we virtually were doing what they directed us to do. And that necessitated, well, I remember I stayed at the table almost all night, probably closer to the table than I was actually standing at the side of the table alongside Dr. Fink. The only other time that I left the table was when Dr. Stover, who was sitting behind me in a chair, told me to get a sandwich, and then I walked into a little room where they'd put a tray of sandwiches, took my gloves off, picked up a sandwich, and then Dr. Boswell called me and asked for me to come back out. I had taken a bite off the sandwich, I laid it down, and I never went back anywhere else. I went out. At that point in time, I think that was when we started doing the body cavity.
Well, I want to take us back first.
Yeah, sure.
Can you pause that just a second?
Specific memory of the casket or the body in the casket. I didn't participate in that part of it. Paul and some other people had actually taken the body out of the casket, and when I saw it, it was wrapped in the sheets, or a sheet or two sheets, several sheets, whatever, however many was in it. That's my first clear remembrance of the body. Was outside the casket, and the only remembrance I have of the casket is basically I remember a glimpse of it as it came through the door, the double doors that came into the atrium, and that's when I got the impression that it was a grayish brown type thing.
In general terms, Paul, can you tell us about when you did open the casket, and also tell us who was with you at the time the casket was opened, the body was then?
Well, I was standing at the foot of the casket when it was placed on the floor next to the table number 1, the autopsy table number 1, and of course the casket opened this way from my right to my left, and inside was a body bag, which was unzipped quickly, and the unclothed body of the president was placed on the table. I helped carry his head to the table, matter of fact. There was a bloody sheet all around his head, and I got blood on my gloves and everything like that. then we unwrapped the sheets and saw the wound.
Who was with you?
I could not tell you at all who was there. There was a lot of people.
Was Dr.
A lot of
Dr.
hands,
Boswell?
a lot of hands, a lot of hands came down to help bring the body onto the table. I don't know who they were attached to. I couldn't tell you.
I remember when the sheets were taken off, my remembrance is that the body was unclothed and the sheet had been taken off of it. We did the cover sheet first. Dr. Boswell dictated to me the wound, scars, the type of things. I wrote them on the cover sheet. Then the sheet was removed from the head. And when we get to that point in time, I have some questions. You know, I have some questions about how the head was wrapped. You know, it's been reported it was wrapped in a single bloody sheet. I remember a couple of towels that were taken from the head area and thrown on the floor. And I was a little impressed by that because it went up against the wall and
You had to clean it up.
yeah, and I had to clean it up, and it also was on my side of the table. You know, that's where maybe the way that we all remember things. Now, I actually participated in the cover sheet. We did turn the body at that time because of the scars on the back of the body, and also I remember that I believe it was the left leg when we did the measures, the crown rump and the length and so forth. It was shorter then, and that was I asked about it, and they said, well, that was from the PT accident during the war. That was what he was substantial. And then later on, when they dressed him with an elevated shoe on that foot.
Also, that's about that time is when we realized that he was had a bullet wound in his back too, and it was about in the cervical area. Now, one thing about that bullet wound that and today even Dr. Boswell and Dr. Humes stated that he got shot twice from the rear, but that wound did not penetrate the pleural cavity. The wound went in about that far, arched downward, bruised the back of the lung, bruised the pleural, bruised the intercostal muscles, so you could see blood in the intercostal muscles, and that's where it stayed. That bullet did not traverse the body and come out the throat.
And that was
Period.
that wound was examined later on, because at the time the wound was being examined, I had worked with Dr. Boswell, and we had the organs out of the body. One of the ways at Bethesda that we removed the organs, we removed them intact. And we actually tied off the subclavians and the carotids and the renals and so forth, anything that would create a large amount of blood into the cavity, and remove them as in total. And then they would be separated, dissected, and so forth. While Dr. Boswell was actually dissecting or examining the organs on a cutting table above the body, they were probing the wound. And I could see Dr. Humes, because it was right in front of me, I could see Dr. Humes' little finger go to the extent of the wound. And he was probing it from the outside toward the inside. And you could see the impression of that finger under the pleural as it went down. They also tried a standard flat, one-end flat probe. And Dr. Fink had said, well, you know, we might make a interest that is not there, so they went to a sound. And I think it's basically a 20-gauge sound, and I can only remember it was about this long, but I don't think that probably only about half of that sound went into this bullet.
Where do you place that one?
It was right almost at the top level of the scapula, between there and the spinal area, primarily where it's depicted here.
What I'd like to do is I'd like to get Floyd into this conversation. I'd
Did
like
they do a
to
complete post?
start with you,
Did they
Floyd,
do a
and then go
complete
back
post of the body?
around. What I'd like to do is
I thought
backtrack.
he denied that. Some of them said they did go from the
What I'd like to do is backtrack
Yeah.
to when everybody first saw the body, their initial impression of the wounds that they did see, and how you would basically recollect that today, starting with Floyd.
Well, when I first saw the body was when they opened up the casket, and that's when I started taking pictures. And I was doing not only pictures of the body itself and you know, the procedures going on, but I figured, well, this is going to be something for history, and they probably want all these. And I photographed everybody in the room, not as an individual, but as a group, several times. And but there are no photographs left. They're no place.
What was your initial impression of the wound?
My
that you
initial
saw?
impression of the wound is what, like Paul was saying, better than half of the back of the skull was gone. The back and the side of the right side of the skull. Oh, about the throat? Well, it didn't look too awful bad. It looked kind of gross for a tracheotomy. But, I mean, I've seen quite a few of them over in Vietnam and some of the ERs around the Marine bases I've been at. But I've never seen one done like that.
I was there also when the body was taken out of the casket, but I didn't actually take any X-rays until afterwards. But when I saw the head, it was a massive hole from mid-temporal range all the way back to occipital, and this was all gone. I mean, you couldn't even see the mid-sagittal plane. It was completely gone. My hands are large, and I could safely say that was about as big as it was. And it just struck me that anybody could live through something like that. The tracheotomy, it looked like a bullet hole to me that had been widened. Because when I had taken AP films of the cervical, it did show bullet fragments in there. And I took some laterals and it showed bullet fragments. Plus I took some films, at least 5 or 6 different views of the skull looking for bullet fragments. And do you want me to bring that out?
We'll get into
All right. And in fact, my job there that night was to take complete body X-rays. That's why I only had so many films, and that's why I had to make trips back and forth to the towers to run my films. And each time I brought a set of films back, they were thrown up on the viewer. Dr. Ebersol would look at them and he'd say something to Boswell or Humes, and somebody else would say something, and somebody else would say something, and then they'd suggest another view.
I'm running a beacon, I mean, we're running out.
Yeah, we have like 2-3 minutes left.
Why don't we change it now rather than, and then we can get into where we're going to start. I'll let you, invite questions.
Need to get another ashtray, yeah.
Okay, were we gonna start with Rick?
I'd like a two-shot of Paul and Jim together. Individually or together, if you could just give your impressions of the head wound, now that we've heard Jerry's recollection.
Well, my first impression was that it was the biggest head wound I've ever seen. It struck me, it looked like a bomb went off inside his skull, and everything was just blown away. Brain tissue, everything was just gone.
It was an extensive wound, and I don't really agree with the limitations, because the majority of the damage, even though there were some fractures that were running forward into the frontal area, were primarily behind the frontal suture here. The major part of the damage was, as everyone has said, in this area. And I think that if you really want a perspective of where the damage was, just take your thumb and lay it above your ear and spread your hand out so back toward the occipital, never mind, hold on, area. And the protuberance back there would probably say your index finger would be lying on that. This is a general area that most people have seen the major damage of it. And you know, I was there, and you know, we did a lot of manipulation with the head and the cavity and removal of the brain and so forth. There was still fairly solid scalp and bone, even though the bone was, there were fissures and spidering of the bone forward, but there was certainly no bone missing in the frontal area, and certainly not in the
orbital area.
Orbital area.
That was all intact.
You know, in the area of the Pterion there it was damaged, but the major damage was further toward the posterior.
Well, one last question I'd like to pose to all of you, starting with Floyd before Dr. Weck steps in here, is we can turn on just a single shot of Floyd. Based on the nature of such an enormous head wound, were any of you able to, at face value, on seeing that, before any really, extensive investigation into the wounds, determine direction of where a bullet may have struck the president? Was it pretty much decisive at that point in time?
Well, when I saw the wound, I knew that it couldn't have come from the back.
Why?
Because if it came in from the back in that general area, the whole front part of the head would be missing instead of the back part.
Yeah, I agree with him wholeheartedly. And basic physics will tell you that. Bullet enters in small and explodes
Comes out big.
out big.
Well, I think through the years I've looked and studied and studied and studied, I think he was hit 4 times.
Why? What makes you believe that?
Well, he was hit in the throat, he's hit in the back, and I think he got hit in the back of the head and the side of the head about simultaneously, which accounts for the enormity of the wound. It just, I've seen that caliber bullet, and it's a small one. It's not very much bigger than, it's a little bit bigger than the .22 really, and I just don't believe a bullet could actually do that much physical damage to that head like it did. Not one bullet.
Well, I'd seen a similar wound to that the summer before, and that particular wound turned out to be that the individual had been shot through the side of a pickup truck window with a .30-06. I agree with Paul in that I think that there were at least four hits. If Dr. Perry is correct, and until the assassination people questioned me, I had, at that point in time, believed that the neck wound was a very sloppily done emergency trach. I think that if in essence the neck wound is a bullet wound or a projectile wound, he was hit there. I think that if in fact what Dr. Humes and Dr. Boswell, Dr. Fink calls an entrance wound at slightly above and to the right of the occipital protuberance or along the nuchal line, if that's an entrance wound with an exit around the Pterion, then there was also another wound that entered slightly above and forward of the ear and exited in the area here that we see the greater amount of damage from. I don't know if the the bone fragments that supposedly that were placed back in the skull that exhibited some evidence of a bullet hole exit in the frontal type of area, then certainly that was one shot. The other shot. Now, during the X-ray and at the beginning of during the autopsy and at the beginning of the autopsy, there was a conversation between Dr. Fink and Dr. Humes about an area here on the side of the skull that had some graying area. There was a question as if that graying area might be lead for a bullet. I never heard anything from that again, and neither in any of the reading that was given to me here recently the last couple of years or any of the other conversations that I've ever had with anyone. I've never even heard a denial of that.
Dennis?
I got a question, man. You're talking, I always assumed there was 3 shots that hit the president, but you're talking about a 4th shot.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned earlier when we were talking, at about somewhere between 10:30 and 12, the AO, I think, was the AO of the hospital, had asked me if I knew anyone that had a security clearance and could type. And I told him, of course, I was a mat tech and I had a security clearance. And this officer and the Secret Service agent, and I don't remember his name, I remember identifying himself at the time as a Secret Service, went up on the 2nd floor in Commander Weiss's office, which is Med School AO office. I typed up a memorandum describing 4 pieces of lead that was taken from JFK's skull. And they were in a little pillbox, about that big around, about so long with a cap on it. And I literally took them out and poured them in my hand. Now those 4 pieces constituted too much to have been one bullet, if you will, or one slug. There wasn't enough there for 2.
You have no idea where those even came from?
Only, as I recall, I typed on an official Navy memorandum letter, it's official government memorandum type. As I recall, the exact terminology, I don't remember exactly, but it described the bullets that were removed from the head of JFK, from the president.
This is unusual because I understand from all of you there was a real frustration in the room that night because no solid bullet fragments could be found anywhere in the body. Is that correct?
Well, I never saw a bullet fragment at all.
And neither did I.
Period.
But see, the thing was, when I took AP films of the cervical, there were bullet fragments in the neck. Now, just from this enhanced X-ray, that has to be a bullet fragment.
But
That's not a bone.
But that X-ray also shows that the frontal lobe of the skull is gone.
This is what I brought up.
And the frontal lobe.
This whole frontal area is completely gone here. That's the right side. Here's the right side of the president's skull. Photograph. Nothing wrong.
Now the fragments that your X-rays show, that you recall seeing in the X-rays,
I saw them the next day. The next morning I saw them. They were brought to me with portions of the skull.
Yeah, tell them about what they had you to do that next day.
I was to tape fragments of the bullets to the skull and take X-rays of it. And I was told by Dr. Ebersol that it was strictly for a bust of Kennedy and not to ask any more questions.
but to make this clear, the pieces of the skull that these fragments were taped to so you could take the X-ray, we don't know whether that had anything to do with Kennedy's skull or anybody's skull.
I don't know that, but I know I did it.
So you went through the procedure of
I went through the complete
creating
procedure.
that X-ray.
See, you gotta remember something. I was an HM3, Hospital Corpsman 3rd class, X-ray technology. And we got a 4-striper. You do what a 4-striper tells you to do.
Yeah, well, I believe it.
Or, God forbid.
I'm going to turn you all over to Dr. Weck now. I'm sure he's got some more medical questions to ask you, and then we can get into more recollections in a general manner, you know. See what- I don't know if you want to sit here and switch.
John, let me ask a couple of background questions. First, I guess Paul and Jim. Did Humes and Boswell perform any kinds of autopsies in the years you were there, or were there junior pathologists at the hospital?
All the junior guys did.
Actually, Dr. Humes didn't really participate much at all.
He was the head of the lab, right?
Right. Dr. Boswell was more or less the teaching senior
Scientist.
staff
Yeah, I
man.
would call him more or less the
You know,
scientist type person.
but
Boswell were number 1 and 2 in the lab at
Yeah.
the time.
So they didn't do autopsies?
No, they,
Did anybody, by the way, how many other pathologists, did you guys have residents and
Yes,
staff people
right,
both?
yes,
How
right.
many, approximately, how many other pathologists?
Oh, my
You
gosh.
know, what do you think were the best?
13?
12, 13?
12,
13.
Yeah.
A lot,
Yeah.
including staff guys and
Right.
residents. Did you guys ever do any kind of medical legal autopsy? Forget who did it, because obviously medical examiner from Maryland on one side, Washington D.C. on the other would have done all of the medical legal cases. But I remember when I was in the Air Force, if we had a death on base, I was at Maxwell, and we had an airplane crash at the other base, Selma. So we did those. They were our people on our jurisdiction. But did you guys at Bethesda ever do medical legal autopsy, like shooting, a stabbing, a beating, whatever, or did they all go to the civilian MEs?
they apparently did, because I was,
Yeah.
you
You don't
know,
remember any?
we didn't.
Yeah. Okay. So although you can't obviously attest to your own knowledge what Humes and Boswell might have ever done in the past, but during the years you were there, not only did they not do autopsies, but they certainly did not have any medical legal autopsies to do. Is that right?
No.
Okay. I was a little confused at the beginning when Dr. Roberts and I walked in. Maybe I just misunderstood, but I thought that Dennis and Paul and Jim were talking about this casket and taking the body out. Then I thought Jerry said that meantime he had already taken x-rays and he was
That's it.
on his way back.
No. The thing is, they had taken the body out, all right? I was sent from the morgue. They don't need me right now. So I went up and got some more cassettes.
Oh.
Then I come back. When I come back and started taking x-ray, after I took the first set of x-rays, that's when I had to leave again. See, I didn't have that many. That was a portable unit, and I could only carry so many films down there. So after I took so many films, then after the first trip back, that's when I ran into...
Oh, okay. That clears it up. Do you remember, any of you, pieces of bone being brought into the autopsy room? And if so, approximately what time, if you recall, brought by whom, and if you recall, given to whom, and if you also recall how many such pieces? Because, you know, we've all read and heard about these references, some 2, 3, 4, and nobody seems to know exactly where and when. And then finally, I'll just give it to you all at one time. Then, as I understand, James and Boswell think that once they had these pieces of bone brought to them, not that they were expecting them, but they were brought in, it was only later, like maybe around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, that they then reconstructed enough from those pieces of bone to say, hey, here's a hole and here's beveling. Prior to that, they had not actually been able to identify the beveling phenomenon. Is that
Jim would be the best person.
Yeah,
I don't remember any bone fragments.
I remember the bone fragment. They came in, they were given to probably Humes because there were 3 people, you know, 3 other physicians at the top of at the head of the table. It was a small bag. I want to say Ziploc, but it wasn't really a Ziploc. It was one of the old specimen bags with the ties on top. It was approximately this wide and about that long. I don't think, I can't really for sure say how many bone fragments were in it. I would say 3 or 4, but there were also some metal fragments in it. It was not, at that point in time, it really wasn't, it was just given to them and it was set on the autopsy table on the right side of the head, just kind of sat on the table next to the head. Later on, the bone fragments were they were trying to place those in. I don't remember any really specific conversations concerning the bone fragments. I later read that one of the bone fragments supposedly contained the evidence of a bullet that it represented the exit wound that they were unable to find prior to that. But, I would have, with the conversations going on, and I remember a lot of the conversations, specifically the ones that were between Dr. Humes, Dr. Boswell, and the gallery. There was no elation or recognition that finally they had some evidence to show the exit wound. That seemed to be, to me, it almost seemed to be an afterthought. The other thing, I read some of what Dr. Humes had testified to, and he testified to the tabling in the two layers of the two layers or laminates of the skull and that type to that extent. I was there within earshot and having to watch what they were doing in case they needed me. I did not see that type of extensive examination of the wound areas. So much so that I was unaware of the wound, quote, the entrance wound in the back of the head. Now, remember that I had set the body up. I had helped with the x-rays, and I had also watched them do the photographs and so forth of the skull in the back of the head, the body, the sides, all, the scars and so forth in the body. So we had moved the body extensively, and I had helped them handle the body extensively, and I was not aware of any wound of that type, that low in the back of the head.
I was going to ask you that next, as a matter of fact. You say that you did not see
I did
a
not.
hole to the right of the occipital protuberance and slightly above it, as was described in the original autopsy. You never saw
No,
such
I
a
know.
separate, discrete hole
I never saw
apart
that.
from the large defect?
No. Oh,
Did you ever hear them make reference to it that evening?
no, I did not.
Did you see any other separate wound aside from the large defect? Anything that was not, part of it, contiguous?
The only thing that I remember was the conversation in the area above, slightly above the ear, where the flap of skull and skin is shown in the photographs. That's basically the only thing. I felt like that the concentrated effort was actually in the area of the large defect.
Dennis, you said that there were 4 pieces of metal.
Yes, sir.
And your opinion that the 4 of them exceeded the amount of metal that would constitute 1 bullet, but it did not appear to be enough to constitute 2 bullets. Had any of you guys in the autopsy room then the night before or earlier that evening seen substantial pieces of metal, substantial pieces of
No.
what would be
No.
bullet fragments?
No, sir.
So you never saw these 4, or indeed any one of those 4?
No, I did not.
Not period. We didn't see any fragments, period.
But I saw them the next day, though.
Dr. White, they were roughly about that square, although they were more elongated. They weren't square, but they were elongated pieces.
You had one large one there, too,
Yeah.
didn't you?
Were they copper jacketed? Or were they, do you remember the color?
They looked like gray lead, just like
Yeah,
off of
See, I saw the same 4 bullets the next day.
You mean the same fragments?
Same
And
fragments.
you were asked to have x-rays taken, affixed to
I've got
pieces
somebody
of
else
metal.
too.
Right.
I've seen those
Did they scotch tape them on, you mean, like? Or?
Yeah, I scotch taped them on.
And he gave you pieces of bone. Were you able to determine from what part of the head those bones would have come, or they were just some irregularly shaped?
Well, the one that I was at least able to determine, it was from the top part of the head where the mid-sagittal plane goes down, and one from the temporal region. But the others, God only knows.
Well, you had seen the body the night before.
Right.
And you had seen the defect. Did any of those pieces appear to have been pieces that would have been or could have been taken from the disrupted fractured calvarium of the president the night before?
Some were irregular, some had a fine line across.
Did they have any dried hemorrhagic appearance?
Right, there
They
was at least one or two that had some
No, of
dried
course, the
lines.
president's body was gone, right?
Right,
So if
supposedly.
they came from the president, they would have had to have been pieces that had been taken
Right,
from his
correct.
calvarium, just removed.
See, this is what I couldn't understand. Why am I doing this after the fact?
I understand.
And I was told not to ask any questions.
Yeah. Did anybody, so you've already answered this, I just want to make sure. You did not see the defect at the base of the skull, and then, inasmuch as you already said you did not see any others, then you obviously did not see any defect higher up, the so-called colic area, as my colleagues on the forensic pathology panel subsequently characterized it, where they have placed, you know, a rather circular piece of metal, 6.5 millimeter, claiming that that was a millimeter. So none of you saw that either.
No.
No.
No, definitely not.
Okay. Did any of you hear that night any Admiral General, whether you knew who it was or not, and I know some were identified and some were known to you as naval people, and others would not have been known to you by name, but obviously you could identify rank immediately. Did you hear any superior officer tell the members of the autopsy pathology team not to dissect out the wounds of the back or the neck? Remember words, no, like to that effect.
No.
That's enough. We don't have to look any further or whatever. Anything like that.
There was a conversation about the Kennedys' desires, you know, as
Yeah.
far as not doing certain sections of the body, but I don't think that, well, it certainly wasn't adhered to for the simple reason that we did a complete autopsy.
I did remember Admiral Galloway saying that just leave that part alone. It's when he's talking about.
Yeah, I remember that also.
Yes,
Right.
he said, you know, he'd say, well, it's a family's wish, it's just to not probe it any further.
Yeah.
So nobody probed the neck?
Nobody probed the
Nobody
neck at
probed
all,
the neck.
Have you ever
period.
seen a tracheostomy wound like that? You guys-
No.
No.
I figured this way, if they'd made that, they could have nicked the carotid artery real easy on either side, exsanguinated the person.
And did any of you ever see any wounds on the left side of the head from rear to front?
No.
No.
And did you see any defects of the scalp coming down below the ear level onto the right forehead region?
No.
Did not extend
Did
that
not.
far?
The only thing that I noticed about the forehead and the eye is the fact that the right eye was poked out of the orbit about that far.
And there seemed to be some disruption of the bony orbit?
The orbit was comminuted.
It was comminuted.
Comminuted,
You couldn't
right.
tell that.
So was the volar bone.
See, that's what it shows in the one film that I have here, but it doesn't coincide with the right side of the film that supposedly Floyd took. So there's a discrepancy there. You can see it here. This whole orbit is completely destroyed. Here's the right side of the face. Everything's intact. But look,
May have a question or two on the, with regard to the x-rays, yeah, they're very interesting.
see, here's another thing too. There's 2 x-rays. Where's the other 12?
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. Thanks, Jerry. So there were 14.
Absolutely.
And we've never seen any of us, have we?
No.
Any of the other 12? Just those 2.
Where'd they go to?
Where did they go?
Supposedly, everything was supposed to be wide open.
Did you ever come to see them develop that night? You know, in fact, that they were developed.
Oh, absolutely. I developed them.
And they came out.
They come out. Everyone came out.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, is it correct, I think it's been documented, that a roll of film, regular camera, was taken from some sort of a naval foreign photographer in the autopsy room that night, grabbed by an FBI or Secret Service guy.
Well, that's-
I
That's
remember
interesting,
seeing,
yeah.
I don't.
I remember seeing that.
There was a tussle. I didn't actually see it. There was commotion. I think Jim did see it.
I was standing on the side of the autopsy and down toward the end of the gallery. There was a camera taken away from an individual by a man in a suit. I thought that he was more or less one of the honor guards as opposed to a Navy corpsman. I mean, he wasn't in uniform, but I remember it was one of the dress, you know, the brightly colored
Someone
type.
else,
Took the camera away from him and exposed the film.
I see.
That was, you know, that was a commotion, but it wasn't really. I mean, with all of everything else going on, I just.
Do you remember a particular moment in time when anybody came in and stated that a bullet had been found back at Parkland Hospital? Was that information made known to any of you? I mean, a statement that was made, or that you would have overheard that night?
I didn't know.
You knew nothing about that?
No.
I see. Were you, so then you couldn't know if some FBI person went over to Humes or Boswell or Fink and told them something privately, quietly, to that effect, or you wouldn't have any way of knowing that then, would you?
I don't remember any private conversations between any of the physicians other than Humes, and he would walk to the gallery and talk to, you know, someone occasionally, but it wasn't like, you know, someone would come to the table and whisper in his ear or anything of that
By the way,
nature.
this gallery that you guys speak of, were there seats, for the teaching?
Benches, yeah,
Yeah.
right. Basically, three-tier benches.
Three-tier benches, I see, like a little classroom.
Right, exactly, right. It was a teaching morgue.
I don't think too many people were sitting down that evening.
They were all...
They were all standing up.
Oh, yeah, it was a madhouse in there. But I do remember there were two, and I found out they were FBI agents, Seibert and O'Neill, were behind my right,
Yeah, I remember that.
mumbling to each other. And I remember turning around, and they looked at me like they were going to kill me if I didn't turn back around, so I turned back.
Isn't it that FBI report, one of those two guys that refers to a bullet dropping to the table during the autopsy?
See, I remember that. And I'm the only one that remembers that.
What's that?
When we picked the president's body up to x-ray his thoracic region, a portion of a bullet fell to the table. And I remember somebody coming over with a pair of forceps, picking it up and said, "Look what we found." They took it over and they dropped it in a specimen glass that had whatever in it. And I'm the only one of the bunch that remembers it.
Do you remember that? Then? How big was it approximately?
It was big enough that it excited everybody. Centimeters-wise, I couldn't venture a guess.
And you think it came during the manipulation of the thorax?
I definitely do. Because it was just enough to pick him up and drop. Once we picked him up, it dropped out.
We just have to stop because we're running out of tape. So we'll just change.
See, I didn't remember that.
Hold that thought.
And I was out of the room, I was in the cooler room, getting...
Answer this to me. This is a contact print.
Yeah.
Was I standing on my head when I took these?
Uh-huh.
Huh?
Yeah.
Was I standing upside down when I took them? No.
You're running? Yeah, it's running. Okay, Floyd, I got a question I'll pose to you from Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Long question.
Must be a long
I'll
question.
probably take a yes or no answer.
Yeah.
He's relating to an article in a magazine in 1978 in which an interview with Robert Newsom, who was a White House photographer at that point in time, the Kennedy district, who stated he was at the autopsy, and he said, quote, "The hardest job I ever had in my career was taking autopsy pictures of President Kennedy." Do you recall anybody else taking any pictures of that
No.
nature?
Don't let anybody else in the door.
Nobody was in there. The Secret Service or FBI, combination of both, took every single film away from me as soon as they could get it. Now, when I was using the Speed Graphics, I was using an electronic flash and a film package which held 12 negatives. Okay, every time the flash went off, he was wanting the negative right then and there, or the flash, so he could count for it.
So to your recollection, there was no one else
No,
taking pictures?
nobody else. Well, there was one other person, it was Mr. Stringer. Other than Mr. Stringer and myself, no, there was nobody there.
He said that, did you hear that? Okay.
These people come out of the woodwork.
Boy, don't they.
Claim all this stuff. It's
Uh-huh.
amazing.
Had to give up your life and limb to get in that room that night.
Just bad to get out.
Yeah, if you got out, there was somebody there to follow you.
Saw Jack Ruby show that night.
Pardon me?
At Bethesda?
At Bethesda? Forget it.
He could have gotten it.
He broke down and realized what to say, got to you. I know.
Well, I don't know, they.
Yeah, I don't know, there were no Dallas police there,
I
you probably
couldn't
couldn't
find
have.
Mr. Stringer, where did you want him in?
All right, his question is, in his research of checking information from the Clark panel and just material that are in the archives, he's been able to assess that there are 2 missing color autopsy pictures and that there are 5 extra black and white autopsy pictures, and there should be. He said, for any of you, do you care to comment on that? Do you have any awareness of how many pictures actually were taken, why there might be a discrepancy?
Well, I don't even know, I don't remember exactly how many were taken. I can give you a rough guess.
Who took the color and who took the black and
I
white?
took some color, and Mr. Stringer took mostly color. He shot about 12 cassettes, it would be 24 prints. And I shot maybe 4, maybe 5 cassettes, was anywhere from 8 to 10.
Color.
Color,
What
yeah.
about black and white?
Black and white were on a film pack, and there was 4 film packs and 3 rolls of 35 millimeter.
Those little bitty pictures.
36, roughly 36 exposure. But we loaded our own, so there was 9 chances out of 10 more than 36 exposures in there.
Is it safe to say you took the majority of the black and white shots?
Yes.
Well, there are a lot of them in the same picture.
They can't really answer the question per se.
I know that I've come up with 8. That's about it.
I guess more definitively, what is your estimate personally on the total number of color and the total number of black and white that you think between you and John Stringer were taken in?
About 140, close to 140.
You said close to 140 total color, black and white.
I don't know. It's kind of warm in here.
He's asking questions about the actual visual elements within the morgue that appear in the so-called autopsy pictures we have with us. Perhaps that's an area that, we should deal with after Dr. Wecht asks his question, then we can deal with X-ray and photographic material and any comments you want to make about what happened on that. That's a whole area we're going to get into after a couple more questions, but we will delve into that because we have your set of pictures and some other stuff here that we can definitely in detail get into any discrepancies. Great, thanks, Mark. He says thank you to all of you and to have a Merry Christmas and a Merry Hanukkah or Merry Christmas.
Happy
Hanukkah.
Okay.
Rick, as Dr. Robertson, if he has a couple questions with regard to the films and stuff.
Was there anybody so we can line up a camera shot, is there anybody?
Let me start with Jerrol first. Before you mentioned that there was what you thought part of a bullet hole in the tracheostomy wound that looked like half its circumference. Was that in the midline or was that to the right of midline?
That looked midline to me.
It looked midline. any of you, and this is open to anybody, see the underlying trachea?
No.
No,
You did not see the trachea?
no.
Was it identifiable as
We-
a discrete structure or not?
We
It
just
was
didn't
not
touch it.
examined. The only examination that occurred was when we were doing the body organs. Dr. Boswell took the flap that we had turned up and lifted it up and kind of looked up in that area, but as far as my remembrance, that was never even probed. The opening itself was never even probed. When, as I said before, when it was entered on the cover sheet, it was entered as a tracheotomy, and Dr. Boswell is the one who identified it as a trach.
See, that's do usual Y-shaped,
No.
no,
We did a U-shape.
U-shape.
a U-shape.
And,
more or less.
well, it was a Y, I guess, so.
But then there was no dissection of the neck, and the higher
No.
zone and the laryngeal cartilages
Were
and
not.
strap muscles were not removed.
No.
They were not visible, really.
Not even touched.
No.
No, they were not.
Jim, if I understand right, you were taking down the notations for the Boswell diagram of the head, is that correct?
No, he did the diagram of the head himself.
Yeah, he did.
You're talking about the freehand drawings?
Yeah.
Yeah, he did that himself. We had a pre-printed cover sheet. Well, most autopsies have it, and what I did was that I was writing in and helping him do the measurements that we would normally have done on a normal autopsy. Paul and I would have done them if we had duty together or something of that nature.
So you were the one, did you write down the 6 by 4 by 3 in the back of the head?
No, that was done by Dr. Boswell.
That was Dr. Boswell. He did.
Yeah, only
You
his
saw
freehand.
him do those measurements?
Right. I saw him do the measurements.
How far down inside the skull were those measurements taken?
I would say they probably were down probably to the hairline below the nuchal
Okay.
area. Ridge.
And, the 3-centimeter area near the left orbit, do any of you have any idea what that represents?
No.
No.
That's strange.
I-
I
Is there any
couldn't figure that
bruising
out.
or hemorrhage in the left inner canthus region of the left eye, as noted in the
No,
report?
no.
Was there any in the right eye?
Yeah.
I didn't really see any hemorrhage per se.
It was very, very dilated and fixed, and like I
Yeah,
said,
it
it was out of
was
the
dilated.
orbit about that far.
Right.
Yeah.
Extremely dilated. I see
You gotta remember at the time, though, the eye was kind of discolored, and it protruded.
Right.
So to actually see a hemorrhagic area, I think it would be kind of difficult.
Okay. Now, Jerrol, when you took these x-rays, the lateral skull x-rays are quite dark. Did he tell you, or did you go way up in your MAS to make those dark?
See, the thing is, these are enhanced.
Right. No, I realize that.
Okay.
But the original, I've seen
The
pictures.
original x-rays, to my recollections, were not that dark, because they were light enough that you could actually see where fragments of the bone were separated. It looked like somebody had taken a hard-boiled egg and just went like this to a skull.
Okay.
It was that well fragmented.
Now, on the left lateral view of the skull, how far away was the film from the skull? Was it plastered right against it?
Right against it.
Okay. And the same for the AP view?
Correct.
Okay. Floyd, you took the pictures of the back of the head.
Yes.
Was there a flap of scalp that would go up and cover the major portion of the hole that was present posteriorly?
If it was stretched, it probably would up and pull down.
Not the whole hole, but just, it would go up.
It would cover part of it and pull some of the scalp down. You might get most of it covered.
Okay.
So you gotta remember the scalp was in two parts. Like I told you before, the front of the face completely drooped.
Right.
You know, it didn't actually look like him because of the deformity of the face.
Mhm.
You actually had to look at him twice to realize who you were x-raying.
Were the postmortem skull x-rays taken before or after the brain was removed?
I'll be honest with you,
Before.
Before?
when I took films, the guy said the brain was there, but I didn't see it.
Okay.
And I was right there,
Okay.
and I held the head and picked it up, and I could see down in the skull. I saw brain fragments, but that's it. if there was anything there, it had to be very small.
Now, when the brain came out, did anybody notice whether cerebellar tissue was involved? Was there a cerebellum? Or
Yes,
maybe
there
you
was.
can't see.
Yeah. Oh, well, yes, I did. I helped infuse it.
Oh, you did? So
Yeah.
you infused it and placed it in the formalin fixed bucket?
With Dr. Boswell and one of the residents.
Did the
The
cerebellum appear to be untouched?
Yeah, it seemed to be
Sorry.
intact, and the tentorium didn't seem to be torn, or, the primary damage actually was to the right, right, and it was mostly probably anterior of the area that I described before.
So therefore, if one of the doctors or more than one referred to cerebellum at the Parkland Hospital, you think they were wrong?
No, I'm not sure. See, there was so much bone gone that they said that there was actually cerebellum tissue hanging out of the thing. There was a large amount
It
of...
might have been exposed, but not necessarily.
Well,
hanging out.
the hanging out may have been because some of the underlying part of the skull was...
So you saw no gross injuries to the left cerebral hemisphere?
None.
Parietal, frontal,
I did not even see the lesions that were described.
Even on the right side?
Well, I did on the right hand, yes. I'm not talking about on the left.
On the left?
Yeah.
Did there seem to be a fair amount of brain tissue avulsed?
I would say probably about half of the hemisphere on, of course, the right side, and no more than not half, about a quarter, but no more than a third, maybe a third.
Was gone?
Of an amount that would encompass the whole.
So what, therefore,
Right.
do you make of a 1,500-gram weight brain 2 weeks later at the time of the supplemental exam?
I don't know.
You've all seen brains. We've seen some swollen brains of people who've been kept alive for, a little while.
Right.
And they get developing cerebral edema. But, he really was dead when that gunshot wound. I mean, he wasn't dead.
I don't know where they came up with 1,500 grams.
I don't
Isn't that a
think,
little bit
you know-
big for a normal
Yes,
brain?
I would think so.
See, I have asked some questions of people, they're friends of mine, that are in forensics, and, does an infused, well-preserved brain actually gain weight to that amount? Judging from 12 to 14 normal, I would say this one was probably no more than 850 grams. Now again too, is that I didn't measure it, I didn't weigh it, I'm just...
They did not take away to the brain then?
Right, no, we did not.
That's all. I never saw a brain.
So they use the Rogapansky method. They take out all the organs intact.
Yes.
Yeah,
And did you notice? I realize they're small, and maybe you would not have noticed this for any particular reason. Whether they actually saw adrenal glands that night?
They did
And now
look around the
don't.
kidneys, but I never saw a brain gland.
I don't, we took everything out, we dissected it part by part. We did the heart first, then the lungs, and then we went down to the kidneys in that area. We did the bowel, removed the testicles. I remember the bowel specifically because that was one of the things in the autopsies I never really cared to do, and Dr. Boswell did it that night.
He ran the bowel?
Yes, he
He
did.
ran the bowel.
And I've been asked the question before. I don't specifically remember the adrenals per se, whether they were sitting on the kidney where they're supposed to be, whether they were atrophied, or whether they were normal size.
By the way, not that this is important for our discussion, but representative sections of the organs were taken in the usual fashion. Whatever was done, forgetting the brain, the missing brain, whatever was done with the remaining tissues, heart, lung, kidneys, so did it put in the bag and place it inside the now
the only thing that was returned was actually the bowel section, and it was actually cut up by the mortician and added back to the plaster of Paris or whatever it was that was used to reform the body.
So you think the other tissues were not placed inside?
No, the other tissues.
Disposal?
I don't think they were disposed of because there were containers for them.
For whole organs?
Yes,
Right.
yeah, we always did that.
Oh, you did?
Yes, they took their sections. What they would do is with the heart, they actually, I'm not sure what the technique is, but what they would go into and open it up along the lines of the vessels, as opposed to sausaging it. And the other, like the kidneys and so forth, they would primarily be a sausage technique, take a look at, and then they would be kept. And then, of course, the sections that they took for the blocks and so forth were put in separate containers also. Primarily, yeah,
Jars.
yeah, most of the organs were, while I was there, I don't remember any of the organs that we did, that we actually put out for disposal or anything of that nature. We kept most of them. As a matter of fact, there was a room there that Paul has on that thing called the chemical room. It did have organs in jars.
Hank did arrive late, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you
he
took the
came
time
in.
sequence of the autopsy?
He came in just as basically autopsy was starting. He,
What, toward 9 o'clock?
oh no, I don't think he was that late.
I don't
know. I don't. See, one of the things that I think the autopsy started a little bit before 8 o'clock. I don't really have any reason to believe that, but
Who was doing the actual cutting?
Dr. Humes.
Now, you had never seen Pink before because he was an Army guy at the
Never
AFIB.
saw him.
As you reflect back on it, did he appear to be somewhat of a second team player, shunted
Yes.
aside, an Army man in a naval setting,
Yes.
called him rather late and so on?
He
was not, I'm not talking about militarily, I know he was not in charge, but they did not defer to him and say, hey, you're a forensic pathologist, you kind of take over here. It wasn't that sort of situation.
No,
Definitely.
actually, it's kind of as you explained. He was kind of secondary there for. I don't know. He did help with some of the examination of the head, but he really did not play a major part in the autopsy at all. Dr. Boswell and Dr. Humes, primarily Dr. Humes, did most of the head section and so forth in consultation with Dr. Boswell, and I guess you would have to say in consultation with Dr. Fink. But the remainder of the autopsy was done by Dr. Boswell.
How much consternation did there seem to be when they probed with fingers, instruments, you guys took x-rays, Jerry, and then the autopsy was done, organs were removed, and they could not find a bullet to match up with that hole in the back. There seemed to be some degree of bewilderment and concern.
Oh, there was frustration.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of
Oh.
frustration.
Boy,
I mean, the atmosphere was just
Unbelievably
relative.
intense.
Yeah,
Just imagine.
because
I've seen presidential candidates come to town with Secret Service, and you think that a war is on.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. The way some of these people were acting in there, you thought the president was going to get off the table, walk out the door.
well, I think some of them probably wished he had.
Randy?
So none of you observed the hole in the back of the head near the external occipital tube?
No.
No white spot on the picture?
No definition at all, entrance or exit.
You don't remember them measuring the 1.5 by 0.6 centimeter hole there?
No.
no.
Okay.
While you're thinking, I want to ask, Jerry, you know now what the panel has referred to, this piece of circular metal, 6.5 millimeters, the color area.
Mhm.
And maybe you already asked this, I'm sorry if I did, but in the x-rays now, in the x-ray, you did not see that that night, or that you didn't ever saw comment on it that evening looking at the x-ray?
No, he didn't.
I
Never said a word about it.
No, I think that judging from the tension in the room and the tension being created by the fact is they could not find any metal fragments or any bullets per se. If something like that had occurred, there would have been. Oh yeah.
You would have heard.
Oh
You would
yeah.
have heard the chairs go up. Hey, we found it.
Yeah, or you would, especially from Dr. Humes and Dr. Boswell and Dr. Fink, where the pressure was.
When they reflected the scalp back and the back of the head,
Mm-hmm.
their autopsy reports state there's several radiating fractures from the vertex and some radiating out down from below. Would you describe that as the correct description?
Yes, actually, it seemed like that there were some of the wounds were, or some of the fractures were radiating toward the sagittal line, and in one or two particular cases there were actually bone missing there. It looks like they had gone to maybe a suture line and then just fractured out. There was a lot of loose bone in that at the time they were working with it, that once they reflected the scalp back, came away.
You don't remember a small metallic fragment present in the back of the head as they reflected the scalp back?
No.
That they didn't find when they brought the scalp back?
No.
Did those fracture lines that you say radiated down, what was their appearance? Did they all stop abruptly? Did they just radiate away, or what?
They kind of just, well, the larger ones where there were fragments missing, almost, they would come to an abrupt halt, and it was like, you know, like it would radiate out with this section being, and then it would be a sharp, definitive end to it.
What was that end that was ending at?
Basically, the sagittal line, center
That's
line.
going upwards, or is that going down?
It was going in toward the center of the head.
How about going back?
Primarily, most of it stopped right at the occipital suture here, you know, as it goes around. And then a lot of it stopped on its own in the area back here.
Okay.
It was not, I mean, it seemed to
Those
be,
fracture lines, they did radiate all over the place.
yes.
And a lot of them did stop abruptly. You'd have a fracture line would come up and stop. Then another one would come off to the side this way and stop. And they would always, for some reason, stop mid-sagittal.
Mhm. And then, you know, they did, the other thing too is they did radiate forward, you know, into the frontal area, but there was no, I mean, no absence of bone, no real tearing of the scalp in those areas.
Somewhat wavy appearance to the area in the back immediately?
Well,
From the crown of the skull up forward, is there somewhat wavy appearance to the fracture?
not that I noticed. A lot of the area in there was missing. I mean, it was really fractured.
As far as the mobility of the skull goes, would you say there was distinct mobility of the frontal area above the right eye? Did they move that? Was this portion of the skull here rather mobile, as they described in the autopsy report?
I would think that yes, it was readily movable.
Okay. Was there another fracture on the left side of the skull back here that was somewhat mobile?
No.
No.
See, when I picked the skull up to take x-rays of the skull, it felt mushy, like the bones were moving. And specifically on the right side, when I picked the head straight up, I had my hand over the fracture area. I could feel it. And I made the comment that night that it was moving. I said, this is really terrible. You know, and the funny part about it is, to see something like that, it just caught you off guard. You're not expecting to see that. And like we were teasing each other here just before, everybody else is a little bit older than I am, and I was just a young guy. I was around 21, 22 years old. And really, I never saw anything that bad. And it just caught me. And that's why it's such a vivid memory that sticks in my mind. But I never talked about that for over 30 years until somebody got in touch with me and let me know that the gag order was rescinded. I never told my wife anything about it.
Has they really enforced that, or made it apparent that they would enforce it even after you left the Navy?
No, I don't think so.
They made believers out of it.
Yeah.
They sure did, yeah, but I imagine that after we had left the Navy, we could have said anything we wanted to, but just,
Once you were out, you were out.
you're out.
But that morning, when you were brought before the Admiral, and you were to sign the order, he said, you keep your mouth shut, or you'll wind up in prison. And you're looking at an Admiral, and he's telling you if you open your mouth, you're in real hot water.
I just have one final question. Is there any question in anybody's mind that there was only one hole on the back, not the head now, on the back, from the lower neck on down?
Just one hole.
You saw one hole, and
That's it.
That's all I saw.
No chance that splashes of dried blood, which we do see in photographs.
Right, you do.
Could have covered up, or could have been overlying a small bullet hole, any possibility?
I didn't ever see it.
No,
I don't
there's
really
a lot
know.
of blood on her that did look like a bullet hole, wasn't a bullet hole though, in reality.
I just want to ask a question, getting back to the Secrecy Act. Jerrol, or anybody, where do you feel that came down from? Who established the fact that everybody, that had to sign this?
Well, I feel it came down from higher than the Admiral, Callaway. That he was told that he was to gag everybody in the autopsy room that night, that nothing was to get out.
See, we didn't sign those letters till that next Wednesday.
Yeah, but we had...
See, that's funny, you signed yours next Wednesday. I signed mine the next morning.
Well, we were called in about 9 o'clock as we were leaving in Dr. Stover's office.
Stover's office, right.
And we were told not to do that, but as Paul said, we were not officially given the letters until Tuesday and Wednesday.
Tuesday, Wednesday, right.
Galloway was head of the festa.
Yeah, he was the admiral that was in charge of it.
Silver was,
He was the...
Chief surgery, wasn't
No, he was a medical
Silver
school.
was CO of the Naval Medical
CO of the
Yeah.
hospital
the
school.
medical
He was the
school.
commanding officer of the Naval Medical School.
Yeah.
He was Hume's boss,
Boss,
if you
right.
will, or immediate superior.
Right,
But under Galloway.
yes.
Under Galloway.
Would this be considered common practice considering the situation, or do you feel this is slightly unusual?
I didn't think it was that
I
unusual.
didn't pay any
I didn't
attention
think so.
to
I
it.
thought this was above and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Well, it's nothing unusual in the military.
No, I thought it was standard military
well,
Well,
practice.
it's something sensitive to put a gag order on the people involved. That's nothing unusual.
No. I didn't
Well,
think so.
all right, maybe I overacted at the time, but like I said, I never, in all the years that I was there at Bethesda, never ran into the Admiral. I ran into him that time.
Well, you know, when I was asked to, initially I was kind of commanded to appear for the assassination committee, and I told them I wouldn't do it without a subpoena. Then they came and I signed a deposition for them. At that point in time, I received 2 letters, one from the Department of the Navy, one from the Department of Defense rescinding that order.
The order, gag order.
You were still in?
No, I was
No,
out.
we were out.
I had been out quite some
I
time.
guess they did that for formality, because we were all civilians at the time.
Yeah.
They had no jurisdiction over us at that time at all. It's just that, now, what happened to me, two gentlemen came to see me. One was Mr. Perry, one was Mr. Kelly. And I didn't know at the time, until I talked to Mr. Jenkins here, that Mr. Kelly was an FBI agent,
Yes.
and I thought he was a lawyer. But they came down to Gainesville, Florida, while I was going to college at the time, to interview me. Now, I had not received that letter yet. See, the letter was supposed to come out before they came down to see me, and I got it about a week after.
Let's stop here, we have to change the tape one more time.
Let me ask you something. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You said you infused the brain.
First question is, how did you find your way onto the House Subcommittee on Assassinations?
I was invited to be one of the 9 forensic pathologists serving on the forensic pathology panel of the House Select Committee on Assassinations. I do not know who specifically recommended me. It's my understanding that they were concerned if I were left out that there would be accusations of preconceived bias, so that they reluctantly put me into the group. They had to do that, moreover, because they already had 2 other people who had expressed opinions in behalf of the Warren Commission, Werner Spitz and James Weston. So I think that they really had no alternative but to include me.
Of all 8 forensic pathologists that were on that panel, how many of them, including yourself, do you feel came in with preconceived opinions about this, or whether or not they were open to just looking at the evidence the government presented?
Of the other 8, I know that 2 had expressed definite opinions of an unequivocal nature concerning the Warren Commission report, namely that it was correct. The conclusions of the Warren Commission report, the conclusions of the so-called Clark panel, the panel put in place by then Attorney General Ramsey Clark that had studied the materials in '69, 2 of them had expressed public opinions. Of the remaining 6, I know that there had been opinions expressed privately on more than one occasion at meetings of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the National Association of Medical Examiners, and other places, indicating that they believed the Warren Commission. But I can only state that 2 had expressed these in some kind of an official, public fashion.
Can you describe for me the exact elements in which all of you on the panel, when I mean elements, photographs, x-rays, materials of any kind, can you describe to me the wealth of material you were working with to try to reach a final decision?
Essentially, the panel had all the autopsy materials that I recalled having seen at the National Archives when I was the first non-government forensic pathologist given access to the JFK materials at Smithsonian Institute. I know that all of those were there. Then there were some additional things, including some subsequent reports that had developed in later years under the auspices of the Rockefeller Commission, and then simultaneously with our own reviews, some thoughts, probably incomplete, non-final, unofficial at that time, from some corresponding panels that were functioning with us at the same time under the aegis of the House Select Committee, such as the radiology panel, the photography panel, the criminalistics, ballistics panel, things of that nature.
As a governmental investigating body, what was the final conclusion at the end of the day?
Well, the end of the day for the House Select Committee on Assassinations was that with a high degree of certainty, there were 2 people shooting. There were 4 shots. Those were the findings of the House Select Committee on Assassination. The panel, of which I was a member, my 8 colleagues, they essentially concurred with the conclusions of the Warren Commission report vis-a-vis a sole assassin. They brutally criticized the autopsy. They were unbelievably harsh on Humes, Boswell, and Fink when those 3 people came to have a discussion, to be interviewed by the forensic pathology panel prior to the conclusions being drafted and the testimony being given orally at a meeting of the House Select Committee when we wrapped things up. They raised questions about everything, where the holes were, where the pre-existing wounds had been made, what was done in the autopsy. They raised a million questions, but somehow, even though they did not get answers that explained all of these deficiencies, they nevertheless came to the conclusion that the single bullet theory was correct, that it was possible. However, the overall committee of the United States Congress, as I indicated, did conclude that the Warren Commission was wrong, that there were 2 people firing shots at the president's limousine that day. Rather amazingly, nothing ever happened thereafter. The House Committee never followed through via Congress by a formal request, to my knowledge, of the Department of Justice and the FBI or to the executive branch of government. It was as if this had been done as a kind of an academic exercise. It was as if that this was being done in some kind of a vacuum, that it had no purpose, no utilitarian, pragmatic reason. And that, of course, was absurd because it was the House of Representatives which had established this committee. They weren't forced to do it. They weren't doing something with reluctance. They did it. They undertook this massive study. They then came to a conclusion and just let it hang out there to dry with nothing being done as a follow-up.
Oh, but that conclusion about a possible conspiracy and two gunmen did not come about from anything that was found in the so-called medical evidence, correct?
That's correct. As I indicated, the panel, except for me, concluded that the number of shots fired, the wounds sustained by the President and Governor John Conley did, in fact, fit in with the original scenario. They moved the bullet hole of entrance on the back of the President's head up 4 inches, 100 millimeters, 10 centimeters. They did make some other revisions, but their conclusion was in line with the original autopsy team.
And this was based pretty much on the autopsy material and, I mean, the photographs and the x-rays, that was the basis of that?
The photographs, the x-rays, the autopsy report, some corollary information that had to do with the weapon, the ammunition, all of these things were put together, and they came to this seemingly incredible conclusion. By the way, when I asked, implored that we request and have done a repeat experiment such has been performed some years ago at Edgewood Army Arsenal to see what bullets would look like when they struck bones of human cadavers and so on, they refused to do this. And Blakey, the executive director of the entire House Select Committee's apparatus under the auspices of the United States Congress, Blakey would not do it. First he said it would be too expensive, then it would be too cumbersome, and some of my colleagues piped in and said that we could not simulate the events of November 22nd, 63 with precision, and therefore the findings might be inconclusive and misleading, all kinds of cockamamie things like that. They would not do that experiment again.
And basically it's safe to say that the analysis of the x-rays and the autopsy photographs were based on the fact that of the belief on the part of the members of the panel that those materials were in fact true and honest.
Oh yes, there's no question that the x-rays, photographs, and all other pieces of documentary evidence submitted to our panel that my 8 colleagues assumed without question the authenticity and originality of those materials.
Do you believe them to be authentic?
No, I had doubts at that time. I have greater doubts today. I don't believe that all of them are forged or revised. I believe that indeed some of them were. The more I have learned, the more I have come to this conclusion. I must say that a lot of new information has emerged in the past decade or so through other investigative type of activities and analytical approaches, but still in '79 there were questions that could be raised that should have been pondered as a matter of reasonable objectivity. Not total cynicism or skepticism, but just to really understand what we had and to try to evaluate why certain things of a tangible, concrete nature did not jibe with each other, why there seemed to be these physical inconsistencies, indeed some inconsistencies that were basically anathema to known forensic pathology concepts.
Who, as part of the committee at that time, made the decision not to have the doctors at Parkland Hospital look at the autopsy photos and x-rays?
I don't know of my own personal knowledge, but you can be sure that it had to have been Blakey. Blakey exercised a very strong hand and controlled the activities of the entire committee. You must remember that the first executive director appointed was Richard Sprague of Philadelphia. Dick Sprague, former first assistant DA, was then and today acknowledged to be one of the foremost criminal trial attorneys in America. His record at Philadelphia probably has never been duplicated by any prosecutor in the country in terms of his proceeding in murder cases for the prosecution. After he left the DA's office, he established an equally commendable record as a defense attorney. And I can tell you, having worked with him on some cases, that he is indeed a master trial attorney. Dick Sprague came down and approached us with utter objectivity and said that he wanted to get homicide detectives and he wanted to get some real trial attorneys who knew how to proceed with the investigation of such a case. They became very alarmed when he began to ask for records, and he wanted to subpoena certain records from the CIA and the FBI files and so on. Then it was like chickens running around with their heads cut off. So they forced him out. They literally pushed him out, and they brought in Blakey. They knew they could depend on Blakey, especially if they fed him the mafia lure and bait, because Blakey sees the mafia under every bed and responsible for every single crime in America, including those that we know have been orchestrated by the government. I'm sure if you were to ask Blakey, he would tell you that the mafia really was responsible for Watergate, that the mafia really was responsible for the BCCI and savings and loan scandals, and more recently the Banco di Nacional Livorno. He would attribute everything solely to the mafia. Well, as far as I'm concerned, we know that the mafia was utilized and indeed was involved in the Kennedy assassination, but to come up with the conclusion that the mafia did it from beginning to end and that no governmental agency was involved, no governmental agency gave protection and immunity and a go-ahead sign to some of the mafia leaders is, of course, an incredible degree of naivete. Blakey is an educated person. He is a lawyer and a law school professor. He is not a dummy. He knows full well that the mafia alone would never have dared to undertake this and could not have orchestrated things and protected events after the assassination. To have done this going in is one thing. To have been able to set up the secondary conspiracy that followed, as our dearly beloved now departed colleague Sylvia Meyer entitled her book Accessories After the Fact, that was the bigger conspiracy that could not have been handled and controlled by the mafia alone. No way.
Do you remember when you were on the panel ever reading or hearing of the depositions given by Paul O'Connor and Jim Jenkins, the two technicians assisting the autopsy at Bethesda? Did you ever see any?
No, I do not recall those at all. I came to know Paul later on when we met in conjunction with the making of the excellent TV series, well, a one program, but a 4 or 5 hour program, The Trial of Lee Harvey Oswald. But I don't remember anything from O'Connor or Jenkins or any of the other technicians at the time.
The only testimony or depositions that you were made aware of was those of Colonel Fink and Dr. Hughes and Boswell.
Yes, well, as a matter of fact, I was excluded from those interviews. I learned about them after they had taken place. I hit the ceiling, and I let Blakey and my colleagues know what I thought of them. I consider that to be an absolutely indefensible, unethical, uncalled for act of proceeding with those interviews and excluding me. And their answer was from Blakey, well, since I had seen the autopsy materials originally in '72 at the National Archives, that it really wasn't necessary for me, that this would have been redundant, and they were concerned about my time and so on. Well, it was an outright lie, and I think that it tells you something about the kind of person that Blakey is. Not only is he so unethical as to have done something like this, but he doesn't even have the integrity and decency and moral strength to look you in the eye and tell you that he's going to do it. He did it and then came up with a totally false story to rationalize and explain why he had done it. He had no justification, and had I known about it going in, you can be sure that I would have been there or I would have wound up in jail, because I would have been pounding on the doors and pounding on Blakey's head. they knew not to tell me in advance. I learned about it when it was a fait accompli.
Now, the autopsy pictures were never shown to anyone during the Warren Commission investigations, and during the House Select Committee investigations, they were only shown to this 9-member forensic pathologist panel. Did anybody on that panel with you question the fact as to why the Parkland doctors, who had such a vivid recollection of the nature of the head wound and the throat wound, were never shown this material?
No, my colleagues did not seem to be troubled by that. I was bothered by it, and I raised questions because I knew then, as did all of the responsible, knowledgeable critics of the Warren Commission report, that there were inconsistencies, glaring inconsistencies, among the physicians at Parkland Hospital and at various times from 63 on to the time that we were convening in 78, 79. But there again, we could not bring them to have these meetings and interviews and discussions and to try to burrow in on the basis for these inconsistent statements.
One gets a sense from that whole investigation of the House Select Committee that they seem to put very little value on eyewitness, recollections of what happened back in 63, as opposed to evaluating the so-called best evidence or scientific evidence, which is the X-rays and the autopsy photographs. Is that basically true, that they felt someone's memory really didn't hold up to what we could see in these pictures?
I would say that it is essentially correct that eyewitness testimony was ignored or not even solicited. I would say that the approach taken by this House Select Committee, the staff that it had structured and the various panels put in place was not much different than the kind of approach taken originally by the Warren Commission, that if there were people who had something to say that did fit in, they would be referred to, and their integrity and credibility and their ability to recollect would be accepted. If there were people who were eyewitness individuals at Dealey Plaza and to other events who had stories to recount that did not fit in, they were discredited or ignored.
And where this was supposed to be a more far-reaching investigation, I mean, that's why they did it a second time, correct?
Yes.
Did you find it unusual now moving away from Parkland into Bethesda, why they only seem to consider it important to interview the 3 autopsy doctors and not the other members of the staff, for instance, the man who took the X-rays, the man who took the autopsy pictures? Why did you question that at all?
I remember raising some questions, yes, about the technicians, because I had heard that there were some different stories being told by a few of them, although my recollection is that much of what we have learned in the past 10, 12 years from the various technicians and photographers present at Bethesda that night had not been made public by those people prior to 78. Many of them were still living under the fear of an order issued to them by Admiral Galloway and by other high-ranking officials at the time that they were in the Navy, never to speak about this. But the panel, as I have indicated, led on and essentially controlled administratively, investigatively by Blakey and his people, did not push for these technicians to be present. I believe that the reason is that Blakey and his staff came to know about the problems that were posed when one listened to the recollections of O'Connor and Jenkins and Riebe and the others, and Custer, the X-ray technician, and they simply preferred not to have that kind of information muddy the waters, especially the waters in which the forensic pathology panel was sailing. And therefore, the easiest approach was simply not to call them and not to get into all the kinds of things that Custer and Jenkins and O'Connor and others would have been able to tell us at the time, as they are now telling us today, and they have been for the past several years.
So it's safe to say when an investigation by the government looking into this whole matter a second time does not depose or ask to testify the man who took the x-rays and the man who took the autopsy pictures, which are considered to be the best evidence that the government has, even today, as we enter the 30th anniversary, isn't it safe to say that it was a fairly inadequate investigation the second time around?
Yes, I think it would be correct and accurate and fair to state that it was less than a thorough, all-encompassing investigation. And that's sad, because it was, as you have indicated, set up to be an all-inclusive investigative panel. It had the authority of the United States Congress. It had the ability, the opportunity to do things, and it was muffed, and I believe deliberately so. It was controlled. Blakey knew where he was going. He knew from early on where he was going to wind up. This was a golden opportunity for him to work and produce another book, dumping it on the mafia and so on. And the panels, you see, were kept separate, so that there was no opportunity to really share things in an ongoing collegial fashion and to make the most of the combined areas of expertise. As a result, one hand did not know really what the other was doing. They were kept essentially sequestered physically and intellectually, and then the results could be put together in any kind of a mosaic that Blakey chose.
Do you find it unusual, now almost 14 years later, with all this additional information that has found its way to the surface in the way of eyewitness testimony and other types of things, that you're still the lone dissenter, you're the odd man out of this group of 9 forensic pathologists?
Well, no, I don't find it strange at all. Of the 7 remaining members, 1 has died since that time. I don't believe that any of them is going to be rushing to change his mind publicly. What they really believe in their hearts and minds privately, I can't be sure of. But I know that there are misgivings from 1 or 2 of them whom I have spoken to, at least some hesitations and some doubts, but I'm not the least bit puzzled by the fact that they've got to stick with the original official opinion that they expressed. They gave the Warren Commission report their imprimatur. Their professional careers and reputations are at stake in their minds. Not that anything would happen to them, they wouldn't go to jail or so on, but it's a very important matter of professional pride and concern. So I'm not the least bit surprised. And I might add, I'm not the least bit concerned that I am a so-called odd man out, a lone dissenter. I don't care what the appellations are that are attributed to me with apparent denigration and mockery by people like Blakey and Bellin and Spector and so on. I say with great pride that I am delighted to be in this position, because I truly believe that within our lifetimes, and I think in the not too distant future, whether that's 2 years or 3 or 5 years, we are going to have this case unraveled. We are going to be able to show definitely that there was a conspiracy. We're going to be able to show that there were at least 2 people firing from 2 different locations, so the case will break. So that's fine with me. My ego is strong enough to withstand the kinds of critical comments that have been made by some of those smug individuals. I might say, however, that I am very much bolstered by the fact that about 85% of the American public rejects the Warren Commission report. So it isn't exactly as if I'm a lone wolf howling in the middle of the night while my fellow forensic pathology panel members disagreed with me, and while I may be the only forensic pathologist to have taken a strong, continuous public stand in opposition to the Warren Commission and strongly emphasizing the importance of discovering the truth in this case, nevertheless, I am on the side of 8 to 9/10 of the entire American populace on this matter. And abroad, I can tell you from samplings and surveys and personal experiences that among people who care and read and know anything about history and relationships with America and domestic politics in America, that probably over 90% of people, whether it be England or Singapore, China or Paris, Tel Aviv or Oslo, 90% of the cognoscenti, of the intelligentsia, would just laugh openly or up their sleeve if you were to put the question to them about the validity of the Warren Commission report. It's a farce, and despite all the efforts of the American government repeatedly and in many ways through all of these years, now almost 3 decades, they have not been able to crack into that overwhelming majority of Americans who reject the Warren Commission report. Just think of how abysmally they have failed, despite the effort, despite the expenditure of millions, tens of millions of dollars, despite all of the foul play and tricks and games that they have engaged in against critics, all the things that they have done, all of their manipulations and Machiavellian cunning and so on, and all of their plants within the news media, and all of the sycophants like Dan Rather. He's the epitome of that genre. Despite all of that, they have failed. Just think, you won't get 85% of the American public to agree on whether baseball is a great sport and whether motherhood is a wonderful thing and whether apple pie tastes good. But you got 85% of the American public now, almost 30 years later, saying, we don't believe the Warren Commission report.
I just have one final question to ask Dr. Weck. But we're at 28 right now. And, you know, based on your knowledge of their testimony over the years of these different panels and so forth and so on, discuss how, if any, variations have come out in their descriptions of the rooms and so forth and so on. Are we ready right now? It's running? Okay.
Commanders Humes and Boswell were chosen to do this autopsy at Bethesda Naval Center, despite the fact that they did not do autopsies and, more importantly, had no training whatsoever in forensic pathology. It's extremely important and quite fundamental for the American public to understand this series of events, to appreciate the fact that the performance of an autopsy on the President of the United States, with determinations to be made as to the number of shots, angle, trajectory, differentiation between entrance and exit, lethality, all of these things, the government called in 2 pathologists who had no experience whatsoever in doing that kind of autopsy work. The third man, Pierre Fink, was called over from the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. Pierre was an Army man in a naval setting. He was called in as a kind of an afterthought. He arrived late, and he was in a very awkward position. Moreover, Pierre Fink really had very little direct hands-on experience with medical legal autopsies. His work really was more of a review administrative nature, and largely directed to airplane crashes and some other things like that came under military jurisdiction. So the reason that we began with an inept autopsy was because we began with incompetent, untrained, unskilled forensic pathologists. Well, 2 with no training, and a third one with relatively little experience. The findings that night were, as we know, all botched up. They missed a bullet hole in the front of the neck completely. They never talked with the doctors at Parkland Hospital until the next day. And later they gave testimony which they wavered on. They bowed to the pressures of Arlen Specter and others. First they said that they did not think that there could be such a thing as a single bullet theory, that it was very unlikely, if not impossible, that one bullet could have caused all the wounds in Kennedy's back, throat, Conley's chest, wrist, and thigh. And then they gave in to pressures. Now that alone shows you that something is wrong. A forensic pathologist should deal with his work in an objective fashion, and when he arrives at conclusions, he should be prepared to stand firmly behind them. He doesn't buckle to pressure from the district attorney or a county commissioner or a governor and have his mind changed because of political factors. That's exactly what happened here. They never told the American public about the missing brain. They learned about it back in '66. It wasn't until almost 6 years later when I discovered that at the National Archives, and that was made public through Fred Graham of the New York Times. That tells you something about their lack of integrity, about their lack of professional honesty, the fact that they did not disclose this information. Then they went into hiding, so to speak, on the JFK assassination and chose to remain silent, as we are told, even though the Ramsey Clark panel back in '69 gave us a new location for the bullet wound on the back of the head, even though the House Select Committee's Forensic Pathology panel gave another location for the bullet hole on the back of the head. What did Humes and Boswell and Fink do? They went along under stern criticism and after intense pressure by my colleagues on the Forensic Pathology panel with the new location of the bullet hole on the back of the head. Humes and Boswell and Fink had placed the hole at the occipital protuberance. That's the bony prominence at the base of your skull, 1 inch to the right of the midline. In '78, under these pressures from the Forensic Pathology panel, they said, well, we guess we're wrong. The hole then is up here at the top of the head, the so-called cowlick area, 4 inches higher. And that's the way it remained from '78 until 1992. And now in 1992, with the publication of interviews of Humes and Boswell on May 27th, and then Fink in early October of this year, Dr. Lundberg, the editor-in-chief of the Journal of the American Medical Association, now tells us that Humes and Boswell and Fink stand by their original eyeball versions, and they now have restored the bullet hole of entrance to the bottom of the skull. Remember, they have also identified beveling. That's the inward cratering phenomenon that occurs when a bullet enters the calvarium, the bony top of the skull. It's not just saying there's a hole there. They give you the characteristics and the internal features of that hole. So where do we stand today? Where we stand is an absolutely beautiful position. If we were getting ready for trial, we would now be able to sit back and do nothing, because we'd have a good chance of getting the case dismissed even before trial commenced. Because the government's official version was that there was one shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald, that he fired 3 shots, that 1 shot hit the president in the back of the head, and another shot missed, and another shot went through Kennedy's back, through his neck, and then through Connolly's chest, right wrist, and into his left thigh. Now we have the pathologist who did the autopsy telling us that there's a bullet hole at the base of the skull. We've already gotten the Ramsey Clark panel and the Forensic Pathology panel telling us that there's a bullet hole with beveling at the top of the skull, 4 inches higher. Well, you can set aside all the critics, me and everybody else, and just run with the ball that has been presented to us by the government. We've got 2 different holes of entrance on the back of the head. You can't have that under the Warren Commission scenario. If you were the criminal defense lawyer representing Lee Harvey Oswald in court right now, you would sit back with a smile on your face and tell the judge, if he had permitted this case to go that far, you say to the judge, Your Honor, I have no witnesses to introduce. I am just basing my case on the prosecution's witnesses, who have given us 2 different bullet holes in the back of the head. There are 2 other interesting features that one should note with regard to Humes, Boswell, Fink, and the question of who is honest and who has integrity. Fink told his superior, General Joseph Blumberg, at the AFIP, back then, shortly after the autopsy, that this was not a complete autopsy. He was adamant, he was very upset that they were going to characterize it as a complete autopsy on the death certificate and on other official documents, because Fink at that time had some professional integrity, and he knew that it was not a complete autopsy. He knew that there were things that had not been done. They had not identified and discussed the adrenal glands. They had not examined the neck organs. They had not examined the brain. They went back 2 weeks later, on December 6, 63, did a cursory supplemental examination of that formalin-fixed brain, but never serially sectioned it. So they did not know what the hemorrhagic tracts were through the brain that could have shown us which way bullets and bullet fragments moved. So Fink said that then. And now, in '92, he states in his interview with Lundberg that it was a complete autopsy. There was nothing that was undone. Pierre Fink, in 1969, under oath, before the judge in the Clayshaw trial in New Orleans, stated that he and his colleagues were ordered by an admiral or a general not to dissect out the wounds of the back or the neck. And he testified as to the confusion and the number of authoritative figures and so on and so forth. In 1992, Pierre Fink now tells us, via Lundberg and JAMA, that there was no such control, that they, the pathologists, were in control. We know that to be a lie. We know from the autopsy technicians, the x-ray technician, the photographers who were present that day, we know there were admirals and generals, some of whom were not even officially logged in. We know from Fink, under oath in '69, subject to charges of perjury and criminal conviction, we were told then by Fink that they were so ordered. And now in '92, as he sits safely ensconced in faraway Switzerland, he tells Lundberg that there was no control by higher-ranking officials. Which do you think is more likely to be the truth?
What's your personal assessment of the entire JAMA series of articles?
My assessment of the JAMA articles is one of pity and sympathy, as well as one of anger and frustration at Lundberg. I pity him that he chose to do this kind of rehabilitation act of his former military colleagues. You know that Lundberg was in the service for 11 or 12 years. He was a military pathologist. Moreover, he had a close relationship with Humes through the American Society of Clinical Pathologists, an organization of which both subsequently became president within a short period of years. So there's no question in my mind that Lundberg decided he was going to do something for his old military buddies. He was going to rehabilitate them. He was going to reach back in time with a big, broad brush and whitewash them. And he was going to get this monkey off their backs before they left this dear earth. And that's what he set out to do. And we know from my encounter with Lundberg on Larry King Live CNN show shortly thereafter, following that publication of the May edition, we know that Lundberg was unfamiliar with the details of the single bullet theory. He stated openly that night that he had not addressed the single bullet theory. He had already arrived at the conclusion in his JAMA presentation that the Warren Commission was correct, that the autopsy report was fine and final, that no mistakes had been made, and now we have him telling us, admitting, as he had to do when I pressed him on it, that he did not even understand or know the single bullet theory and had not addressed it, had not determined whether it was physically possible. Now, doesn't that tell you something about Lundberg? And then we have Lundberg, who fashions himself as having some interest in forensic pathology. Indeed, many times he fashions himself as more. He is not. He never took formal training. He is not board eligible or board certified in forensic pathologist. And yet we have this man who is the editor-in-chief of the principal publication of the American Medical Association that is concerned with medical education, with the advancement of medical specialization, with the significance and importance of doing everything that you can to improve medical practice in all fields, including medical legal investigation, i.e. forensic pathology. We have George Lundberg stating that this really was an autopsy that could well have been done by people untrained in forensic pathology, that it was okay to have done this. I think this is so intellectually dishonest. I think this is so morally despicable, so absolutely reprehensible. That man should be absolutely condemned and chastised. He should be removed from his position. You must also keep in mind contrary to what many, many people think, perhaps even many physicians. JAMA does not speak for the AMA. That should be made very clear. The American Medical Association, through its House of Delegates, through its executive officers, has never addressed the Wired Christian Report, has never given its imprimatur. Lundberg did this as editor-in-chief of JAMA without anybody's blessing. It's an authority, evidently, that he has. Then the games that he played thereafter with letters to the editor. I'm still sitting, as we now talk, for my letter to be published. I chose to ignore the first round in May 27 of '92, and then in the later article he referred to me by name. And there's no question about his ethical, moral responsibility to publish my letter. And I intend to pursue this further, but it tells you something about the fact that he held back on many letters that were sent to him following the May 27th edition. He waited about 3-4 months, and he is now holding back on others. I have yet to see one letter published in response to the Fink interview that appeared in October. So it's 2 months later. What right does he have, morally, ethically, what God-given right does he have to be so biased as to conduct himself in that important position in such a fashion? And I think that Lundberg has a lot to explain as to why he got into this at all in 1992, and having gotten into it, why he approached it in such an incredibly biased, prejudicial fashion.
One last question before I, do you want to take another?
No, it's okay, go ahead.
On a personal note, as we enter the 30th anniversary of the assassination, what would you tell the American public about this entire affair? What do you think they really need to know? Is it over, or is it just barely begun?
I think the American public should be now really tuning in with greater intensity, fervor, and interest than ever before. The commission that will determine how materials are to be released will be put in place by President Clinton sometime next year, I hope early, and then we'll be getting into materials and information that heretofore have not been seen by anybody. I'm sure that this commission is going to be reticent about releasing everything. There undoubtedly will be a lot of court cases and people going in to seek judicial intervention. But I think that we are going to get more information, and that we're going to get a lot more pieces to the puzzle. There are some fine scientific analytical studies that are going on by radiologists, by photographic and computer experts and so on. There's a lot of things happening, different people, and it's exciting. It really is, because I'm learning things myself with each passing month as people contact me and so on. And I'm very delighted at the number of new people, as well as, of course, some of the old-timers who continue with their investigative studies, because you see, what we're able to do now is to buttress and corroborate one finding after another via different techniques. If somebody comes up with something through his particular technique, and someone comes up with an identical or very similar answer and analytical expose using another technique, that is beautiful, that's marvelous. I am very optimistic, and I am also encouraged and thrilled by the fact that Americans remain so intensely interested in the JFK assassination. Whether I talk to a high school group, whether I talk to a Catholic Church women's group, a group of physicians, a seminar and symposium, a college group, whatever, it doesn't make a difference. Black, white, young, old, male, female, Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Muslim, atheistic, really, whether it's the East, the Midwest, the South, the West, the interest is high. This is incredible. And the beauty of that is, you see, that it's going to prevent the government from just ignoring this and hoping that it will go away, something that they have very, very fervently prayed for now for 30 years. So with the release of new information, with the continuation of new analytical studies, with the continuing interest, deep-seated, far-reaching throughout America, put all of these together into the pot, and you can see it's really going to boil and bubble. I truly believe that within 2 to 5 years, we're going to see this thing unraveled. It may take a little bit longer to get all the pieces, but I believe that the door will be opened to the extent that we will come to prove, and the government will have to accept, that there was more than one person shooting at JFK on November 22nd, 1963. And then we'll show that it wasn't Oswald, and that it had to have occurred with government intervention and blessing and so on. It will all fall into place.
Just a quick final thought. Your assessment of the way the media has handled this entire subject over the last 30 years?
The news media, in terms of the principal players, regrettably have performed abominably. When you look at what they have done through investigative reporting and studies and so many other areas of endeavor, and you contrast that with what they have failed to do in terms of the Warren Commission report, JFK assassination, it is truly appalling. But the New York Times and Washington Post, ABC, CBS, NBC, Time, Newsweek, AP, UPI, they have been protectors. Not only have they failed, they refused to delve into this, but they have actually been protective and continuously apologetic and defensive of the government. This is very sad. The reasons are not so simple to understand. One major reason is that they all bought the farm early on. They all moved in quickly. They published, several of them, their own books, extensive publications. Many of the prominent reporters and commentators on TV and so on built their reputations in great measure on this coverage and repeated themselves many times thereafter. They're not going to stand up mea culpa-like and beat their chest and say, well, we goofed and we failed and we were wrong and so on. No, they're going to hold on to this as tenaciously as they can. I am very, very sad, very angry. It's an additional burden and obstacle for the critics, because if we had input from these powerful news media sources, it would be all the better. I'm sorry that we don't have them as allies, but the hard truth of the matter is that we don't. And there are dozens, if not hundreds of examples that I could give you of a concrete, tangible nature to show you their bias and their prejudice. But the record is clear. Nevertheless, we shall accomplish, because there are many other people in the news media field, electronic and print media, that have expressed an interest. I should say that. I don't want to condemn blanket fashion all the news media. I'm just talking about the principal heavyweights in the field. They have been not only unsympathetic, they have been formidable opponents themselves to the body of critics. They have been one of the largest blocking forces of obstructionism and of obstreperousness that we have encountered in our efforts to learn the truth.
Just a quick thing that I forgot to mention to you earlier, if you have any knowledge of this. The original Warren Commission testimony by Dr. Yoon seemed to relate in medical terms, I'm not quite sure the actual phraseology, about possible surgery to the top of the head. That was also related to in the two FBI's agents' report as well, overhearing someone discussing surgery to the head when the body was received. Did your committee in the late 70s delve into this at all?
The Forensic Pathology panel did not find any evidence of any surgery. I must say that there are some things that remain a puzzle today to everybody, including me. I'm not absolutely certain of some of the detailed features of the head wounds, and as we all know, in talking with the autopsy and x-ray technicians and the doctors at Parkland and the doctors at Bethesda and so on, there are many, many inconsistencies and different versions. So we have to learn a great deal more. I don't know about surgery specifically to the head. It would seem that it is possible that some revision of those wounds was undertaken, and I think it is very likely that there was some revision of the tracheostomy incision made, because nobody in medicine has ever seen a tracheostomy incision like the one performed on JFK.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your patience hanging in.
Okay, all right.
Jim article that we just saw?
Lundberg?
Okay, Dr. Lundberg is the editor.
Okay, the editor.
But, all right, Dennis, I'll let you kick things off.
Or, you know, in response to Dr. Lundberg's thing about that the two people were there who knew the physicians, and then he goes on to describe a bunch of things which occurred. But, you know, there are 5 of us sitting here who can testify to non-medical, if you will, such as the type of casket that came in, the size of the hole. You don't have to be a physician or a pathologist to know whether the hole is this or like this or where it's located. Maybe we can't testify to certain medical terminologies, but you know, those two gentlemen may well have reported exactly what they thought they saw or what they did see. But the public can't rely on those two when 5 of us can sit here and the 5 of us saw something entirely different. So it just doesn't make sense. There's something wrong.
I just want to quickly start with Floyd and work the way around. I just want to ask you all one question. Same question to everybody. Have you ever given a deposition or been asked to testify in front of either the Warren Commission or the House Select Committee?
No.
No.
Never.
We'll start doing that so we can, let's start again.
Okay.
We'll start that from the top. Have you ever given a deposition or asked to testify officially for either the Warren Commission or the House Select Committee?
No.
I was called at early in the morning by somebody who never bothered to identify himself, informed me that he wanted to discuss the Kennedy assassination with me, didn't show me any credentials. I had no idea who he was. I was not informed that the gag order was rescinded, and I politely told him in a nice way where to go. I said, if you want to come and talk to me, you come to Pittsburgh, show me some credentials, show me the gag orders rescinded, then I'll graciously talk to you. And I hung up on him.
No, I've never been contacted. The first contact I had was with David Lifton, as far as someone asking me about what happened.
You did?
Yes, I did give a deposition to the Select Committee on Assassinations at my home to Mr. William Purdy and Mr. Kelly.
And what was their position with the government?
They were investigators for the Select Committee on Assassinations at that time, as I understood it.
What's the panel?
Yeah, I also gave a deposition to the House Select Committee. Same 2 individuals, Mr. Purdy and Mr. Kelly.
Okay. So 2 out of the 5 over the last 30 years have been asked to officially talk about this.
Right.
Okay. Why don't we start with Jim, and we'll just kind of wing it. You know, anything you want to discuss about? We're going to now get into the area of the autopsy pictures.
Well, I think what I'd like to do is basically review.
If you can establish the picture in front of the camera, we can always shoot
Okay.
it tight after the fact. But
Okay, the photograph that I'm holding in my hand is one that appears to be with the head down with a flap slightly above the ear. This photograph actually depicts some of the errors that I found in the other one, in the sense that it does show the hand apparently separating a laceration or a defect in slightly above the ear and in the parietal temporal area, maybe even some of the frontal. But the important thing about this photograph that I noticed is that in this area there is an aluminum block type apparatus that we use to hold the head, as opposed to the arm that appears in some of the others that is attached to the table. And in this area here, and I was at Bethesda for almost 2 years along with Paul, and every fourth night we did autopsies, or assisted in the autopsies that were done. And I never saw this type of mechanism, and I'm not even sure that the tables were capable of doing that. To me, that's a discrepancy. The other thing that we see here is that we see a platform above the body that looks attached to the table. Now, the platform we had would rest above the body, but it was not attached, and there was a scale, swinging scale on one end of it. Paul and I have discussed these photographs before, and if there's any other comment, Paul.
No, that looks like the autopsy table they used over in Manly on their animal colony.
Could be.
Now, the discrepancies I see, we'll compare this picture here
Can you
again.
hold that thought? Since we're running out of tape, I didn't realize that. Jerrol ended up talking a little longer than...
Sarah can talk your arm off. Okay, what I was going to point out here is I want you to take a look at this photograph here, and what you see is basically an intact scalp, as opposed to this photograph here, where the scalp was all torn, shredded, and hanging down. That's one of the discrepancies that bothers me. Also, another thing bothers me is all the blackened out areas around the body. Totally blackened out. When we had a brightly lit morgue and Floyd used flash, and we shouldn't have had that.
There should be something at least sometime.
In this stare of death photograph here, something that Jim Jenkins and I had discovered, as there was a wooden sort of structure. You can't hardly see it, but it's real dark here, but there's a wooden structure in this morgue, and we didn't have one in the morgue like that. We had nothing in the morgue that was wooden, period. Also, the shadowing on this side of the head here, if the flash was taken at this angle, there shouldn't be shadows in this area here.
Let me ask you a question, Paul, because I've heard that you describe the tracheotomy or tracheostomy, whatever, as being more teardrop in shape. When you all see the body initially when it's removed from the casket, here it seems to be more, more of a wider.
Yeah.
Can I get everybody's opinion on how they would describe the throat wound when they first saw the body?
This wound here looks, I mean, if you look at it carefully, it looks like it's actually been painted on there. Looks like it's been painted right on the picture. What did you say, Floyd?
That's what it looks like to me, because it just doesn't fit.
No.
It doesn't go in with the rest of the throat.
No.
Another thing, here's another shot of the back wound. Actually, the back wound is right in this area here. And then again, you see an intact scalp, as opposed to this picture here, where it's not intact.
Yeah.
Also, it's interesting to note that in this picture here, this area here is in focus. This is completely blacked out, and this is in focus, indicating that something's been painted on there or something. It shouldn't be that way. I mean, it should all be in focus, not just the top and the bottom.
See, that spot right there you're pointing out to us, can you tilt just a little bit to it? Yeah, right there. That, you say, is the actual wound in the back that you recall?
Yes.
Dr. Boswell probing? Was it Dr. Boswell?
No, it was Dr. Keenan's.
Right, and how many inches down from, is that
Oh.
receiving, or was it much lower down the back when you see it was photographed?
I seem to remember it being about right here.
I think the scapula really is this flat bone here, and it should be kind of across like that. So it's probably, with the head crunched back and so forth, and with all of this compressed down, it's probably would be a little bit lower if everything was straightened out.
Is it possible to draw a line between that back wound and the throat wound?
I would not think so.
Paul?
At the angle he was shot, in the back, he should have come out about here.
Yeah, or on the other side.
Not up here.
Yeah.
And of course, again, like I said, there was no through-and-through wound through the back and out the throat.
So that was never even traced, right? There was never operation?
No, you didn't, we didn't touch the throat wound in the front at all.
Did anybody ask you not to? Why did you not? Isn't that a procedure?
I don't remember.
I don't-
think that Admiral Berkeley stated that the Kennedy family would just rather not mess with the neck wound or something like that, to that effect.
As a layman, can I ask you something? You're doing what is supposed to be a complete autopsy. You opened up the stomach, you removed a lot of organs, the head was a mess. I mean, basically, it was a real mess in general. Why would there be, what difference would it make at this point in time, with everything else you're doing, to do something with the throat? What's the big deal?
We didn't do it.
The thing was, though, in my x-rays, it showed up fragments in the throat, and they weren't interested. To me, that's what I got. I heard the exact same thing. The Kennedys would rather you not destroy the body.
That was the excuse for not putting in or
Right.
tracking the back.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, that came after you showed x-rays of
Right.
fragments in the throat.
Right.
And did you find it curious?
Absolutely, but
There's a
at
better
that
picture
point,
of
it
that
wasn't my job to ask questions. It was my job to
Do you
do.
recall when you did show the x-rays and you brought the x-rays down, and in your own opinion, you could see bullet fragments?
Absolutely, I pointed them out.
I mean, that's one of the main reasons for doing an autopsy is to
Correct.
locate these things. Did you find it, what was the response from other people you showed the x-rays to? Did they see what you saw?
Absolutely, Dr. Ebersol saw it. He knew that was the bullet fragments because it showed where the bones were penetrated from the bullet. It had gone through the cervical spine. There was actual bone damage there, and it showed it.
Well, this brings up an interesting question because we hear that it was never a consideration that this gash in the throat was anything more than a tracheotomy or tracheostomy until the doctors at Parkland were consulted the next day. Yet, if there were bullet fragments in the throat, then that should have answered some
Absolutely.
immediate questions.
All I am was, I'm just an X-ray technologist, and I could see it was a bullet hole. It wasn't that wide unless during the time something else happened. But when I saw the body, that hole wasn't that big. It was as if it was like about that big, and then there was the hole, and like somebody had gone across both sides and opened it enough to put a tube in.
So it was not as extreme as we see
No,
in these photos.
absolutely not.
Why don't we turn to Floyd and have him make comment, because he was actually the photographer while the autopsy.
Here's a good one for you,
Did
Floyd.
Make some comment?
Well,
And if you could show whatever you're pointing out to the camera. What do we see here?
We're seeing the hole or the damage to the right occipital region of the skull.
Now, those are fingers we're seeing on the very right side and a
Down here?
ruler.
Yeah. I think they had to send out to get a wooden ruler. But then too, at the same time, we had some of those little plastic rulers in millimeters with Bethesda Naval Hospital on them. But we weren't allowed to use anything like that. They were not, evidently they didn't want these photos to be associated with Bethesda.
The nature of what we see here in this photograph, what time frame would you put on that photograph in relation to the way the body was seen? Is that the way it looked when you first?
Not when I first saw it, no, because I didn't see the back of it. All I saw was the front of him. But when I finally got around to the back of him, this is what I saw probably about 15 minutes later. Yeah.
So, in essence, we're seeing a huge opening in the head almost to go at the end of the autopsy procedure when
Yeah.
in essence, with the beginning and it's
Right.
So let's get a two-shot of
See, if you compare them with the x-rays, it coincides with just about what you see here.
Can you flip that picture for the video, just like that? That's good. So it's obviously a big discrepancy here.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you want to make comment on any of these other photographs? As far as what you took and what these
Well,
represented? Did these show any semblance of being what you think?
This one shows like it, but they got the wrong kind of rack in there. I don't remember any aluminum rods under his head. I mean, this one is, I don't know. Like Paul said a few minutes ago, you got focus, out of focus, and back in focus again.
Can you point that a little bit more?
Okay.
Well, just
All
give
this
you a
area
little-
is in focus. This area down in here is out of focus. I mean, it's blurry. But then you get down here, and it's back in focus again.
I'm curious, in that photograph, it seems to show some kind of beveling in the lower part of the head, as we hear other people talking about.
Mhm.
And yet some of those other photographs don't show that beveling. Is that another contradiction?
I think that's the procedure. I mean, this is a fracture line here. I think if you look real close, you can see actually the margin of the neck here.
Yeah.
And then what they have done is that they are actually, the fingers have taken the wound and has spread it out. And because you've got the auditory canal right in this area here, so the scalp and the skull has been actually deflected out, and the auditory canal is right here, and these fingers are holding it out like that. And then as you come up here, now this is an area where originally the question about the surgery came up. Basically in this. Now this was a fracture line that ran to the sagittal part of this, and what they have done is they have actually also reflected this part which forward, and I think that right over this area there are more fracture lines. Now one of the things about this photograph is that you see the fracture coming down and then extending across here. That may or may not be a slight extension of a fracture, but you don't see any other fractures in this area. The occipital protuberance, if I'm correct in the orientation, should be right in this area here that's been blacked out. The other thing is that if you look very closely in this, there is an outline of something here that looks like a jagged, irregular hole that has been blacked in.
Now, is this after any kind of brain matter?
Yeah, all of this is after the brain had been removed. This is something that was later on. They reflected back, trying to give, I'm sure, Floyd an area to shot inside the skull.
Here's something for you. See this defect right here?
Can you point that out once again?
Right there.
Yeah, that's
Okay, it shows up here. There's one film. Shows up on the same print there. See if it shows up again. Just happened to pick it up. No, I don't think there's any more. But there's two, same defect showed up. Oh, what's that? Here it is again. Well, it's the same film again.
Now, that defect, as you say, wasn't that originally coinciding with what Dr. Newman had said in the autopsy, that a bullet had entered the lower part of the back of the head?
Mhm.
And that's basically
Where it is.
in that photograph?
Right.
Now, to your recollection of any of you, do you recall the head wound being that way? Or was there any way of discerning any kind of entrance wound?
See, the thing was, though, the head was laying down on the table. The only time we picked the head up is to put films under. That's my recollection. Now, I don't know, if Jim may have saw it, I didn't.
Well, the reason I didn't see it. I'm not saying that it wasn't there, but we handled the body quite a bit
Right.
during X-rays and photography, And, you know, during the examination and so forth, you know, we set the body up to probe the chest cavity. You know, I just don't remember a whole of that description in that area. I mean, there was some fragmentation there, but as I said before, it only went down. To me, it appeared to go to the occipital suture and stop. Now, that's the suture that runs around the back of the head. If you've got an area there, I can't say that it wasn't there because I wasn't looking for it and didn't find it.
See, here it is again here.
But I don't.
See where I'm pointing?
Yeah.
Same place.
But see, there
Now,
now.
do we have a photograph where it does not?
But if that was a wound, then it would have been. Let me show. Let me see the picture, please, if I may. All right. What we've got here is that we have the head actually reflected backwards, and we are compressing this area, as you can see with the wrinkling of the neck, we're compressing this area down. So it's hard to say what this small area is. If we go with the description of the hole should actually be spatially orientated kind of underneath, and this being what we call the cowlick area, down to about here. The occipital protuberance should be here, but it should be orientated like this, and the hole or the wound should actually be in this area here, or above the occipital protuberance, and it above the nuchal line.
At any time, by the time this whole thing was over, this is a question I just bothered me, was a definitive conclusion arrived at as to the nature of the entrance wound or the exit wound, and anybody finally saw, and the whole point of the autopsy was to find out how this man was killed and from what direction the bullets that killed him came from. What was, at the end of the day, what was the final conclusion?
No conclusion.
None.
None at all.
None was even discussed at the table.
Not even discussed.
Was there frustration on the part of Dr. Humes, Boswell, and Fink because they could not come to this conclusion?
No, I don't think. I think that
they didn't really show any kind of an emotion at all about it.
At the end, I think that probably, well, my feeling was that it was something they did not want to discuss there, that they wanted to discuss outside this, and that they had gathered information and that they had come to their conclusions. And quite honestly, on Monday when I came back and I saw the articles and finally someone told me what they had decided, I was shocked. I mean that was the day that my faith in the government as being straightforward and honest with the citizenry died. And you know, I have to admit I was young, I was naive, but it was quite a shock. And I don't know. I just I think that if you read through the descriptions and the testimony that Dr. Humes has given, Dr. Boswell has given, and if you look at and what I have done is that I have actually copied some photographs and have tried to trace the descriptions by the anatomical positioning that they describe. For the most part, I can pretty well do that, and the description correlates basically with what they say. It is the conclusions that they draw from that are a little different, a little strange.
Is there something here that you wanted to show?
I was looking for something to orientate this. Let's continue, and maybe I can find it.
Let me start with you, and we'll work all the way around.
Okay.
This really applies to Dennis. Quite simply, Do your memories, your recollections of seeing the nature of the wounds, the throat, the back, the head wound, correspond to the government's best evidence as we see it here in 1993, photographs and the x-rays that are available? Do your memories coincide with what we see in this physical evidence?
No, I do not remember seeing the wound described as the entrance wound in the back of the head. Most of the other descriptions of the large gaping wound clearly taking into consideration different perceptions, you know, as people see it, correlate fairly well. Some of the other things that are beyond the description of the skull and head have questions about, but I assume we're going to pursue that too.
I don't know if it's premature for me to ask you, was that gaping hole in the head, in your opinion, an entrance wound or an exit wound?
My opinion, it was an exit wound. In my opinion, actually, it could. Well, I don't want to go into the semantics and double talk. I think that it was a portion of both an entrance wound and an exit wound. And
what you're suggesting is the possibility of at least two bullets striking Kennedy in the head from different places.
I think that is not. I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying that from what I've seen and with the experience, you know, I'm not a pathologist either. I have been trained in both neuropathology and pathology and anatomy to a certain extent. But I am saying that what I saw that night, and if I had said there was only one bullet, I would have said that it would have entered slightly anterior and, yeah, well, slightly in this area and would have exited in the area here. If there's an entrance wound lower down on the head, and if it is the entrance wound described by Dr. Humes at the area of the occipital protuberance, and his exit wound, which he describes in the area of the Pterion, which is in this area, then the large gaping hole took in basically three areas: an entrance wound, an exit wound, and another exit wound.
Paul, do you want to comment on the autopsy pictures and what you...
Well, what really disturbs me about what the JAMA article infers that this back wound here was the wound that passed through his back and out his throat. When we clearly were able to discern by examination that this bullet wound in the back went nowhere. It went in through the back muscles, went through the intercostal, which is the rib muscle between the rib, angled downward and stopped, and did not go all the way through as what's described.
What about the throat and the head wound?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I didn't see any evidence of any entry or exit at all. There was no clear definition of an exit or entrance wound at all. To me, like I said, and I described it before, it looked like a bomb went off inside of his head, inside of his skull.
You get a sense of this massive explosion of the head area in most of these photographs.
No.
How do, if we can go down the line, how do we explain that? That seems to be the biggest discrepancy in the autopsy pictures, is that there seems to be an intact head for the most part, other than this flap in the right, you know.
Well,
I think we only have one photograph that may well explain that. Could I see those?
Which one?
That actually would come close to depicting the large gaping wound. And that's the one that, let's see which one. the one that's difficult to orientate, which would be this one.
Right.
You know, this is the only one that I would say that would be realistically applicable.
Now, for someone who absolutely cannot orientate themselves, is that actually at the right back part of his head?
Yes.
Right. With this being the top of the head, this being the neck area, and this being the right posterior side of the skull, here being deflected out and back, this would be, probably would be the ear canal here.
Yeah.
I don't really know if that, I don't know if that is a laceration or a hole in, or a defect, I'm not sure. But this large area was primarily what we all saw.
Now, so that doesn't correspond to any of the other pictures?
No, as a matter of fact, the ones that even show damage like this, and again, I've questioned some things, is that this does have a large flap of skin hanging down, but if you look carefully, you see brain tissue in here that's not macerated. There are a couple that are a little bit better photographs. Let's see. Anyway, this, first of all, it crosses the midline or the sagittal line, which is the center of the skull. Crosses into this area. That may or may not be deflected scalp, deflected from this side back to here. But this area right here appears to be brain tissue. And, well, this area right here. This is, looks to be a scalp that's reflected back. But in this area also, which is across the sagittal line, you pick up some of the brain there, and it has defined, the gyre and sulcus of the brain itself are fairly well defined. It's not as if they have been traumatized or damaged. It's more apparent in one of the other photographs. So it would be hard, hard to relate this photograph to the photograph that Jerry has.
Do you want to make any comments just on your visual scene of the body while taking the x-ray and what you're seeing in these pictures?
Well, actually, this is a good representation, the first thing that I saw.
I think so.
And it corresponds with the enhanced films that we have here.
That seems to be in the wrong place, where the damage in the x-rays seem to be in the front.
But you got to look at the fact this is the way it's sitting. But you're looking from back. You're looking from back of the head forward, anterior, but side view. This is occipital view, anterior. So you have to actually reverse this around, twist it around, and you would get this.
What about that shot from the front that looks like it's taken out there?
Well,
That bottom right-hand photograph.
right here, this is damage to the skull. This shows you the massive damage that he concurred.
What you're saying is that x-ray you're pointing to right now does correspond with most of you saw.
Right.
But the autopsy photograph...
The autopsy photograph doesn't. But you have to really look. The eye should be gone here, but it's not.
But none of you recall the right eye being blown out?
No.
No, it was blown out.
It seems like none of this material seems to correspond to anything else. It's totally confusing. And let's go to Floyd for a second. And basically, you were the one that was involved hands-on in taking this autopsy material. What is your personal assessment of what you're seeing there?
Well, most of these, like it has been said, don't jive with anything else.
Is there anything in this pile that you can honestly say you did not take?
Yeah, well, yeah. These here, I don't know where that one was done.
We can do that again just to show the camera exactly what you feel you did and did not take.
Well, this one here, we didn't have this. Steel rest.
We're gonna have to change the tape one more time. I think, do you feel we've covered this area pretty well? Okay, we'll go ahead. Just make
Okay.
sure we can, whatever you.
Yeah, I will. On this contact print, now you can see everything is in one direction, with the exception of evidently at the time, which I didn't know, I was standing on my head 1, 2, and 3 times. Come in the middle of the roll, pictures are upside down. This is supposed to be one continuous roll of film.
They don't jive.
That's a
No,
good
they
size
don't.
discrepancy right there.
They don't match. I mean, my gosh, looky here. This is the ceiling up here, and this is the floor. There's no way I stood on my head or used my camera upside down.
Is this contact sheet, I'm not sure where you got it, but does this contact sheet basically correspond to the way, the order of which you recall taking photographs, or can you not?
Basically, yes. Basically, yes. I tried most of the time to shoot in pairs, 2 different exposures, so I'd make sure I had something anyway. And that's just about what it shows up.
Why don't we start with Floyd, and then we can work our way around the table with Jim. At this point in time, if you want to say something to the American public about this whole affair and what needs to be done today to address the whole truth, not the half-truth about what we've been told. Just tell me your personal feelings. If there's anything in particular, one instance about that whole evening, one thing that stands out in your mind you feel has never been brought forth, if you feel just it doesn't sit right with you, if you want to each give an anecdote along with your opinion on things, that'd be great.
But the only thing the American people can do now is start putting pressure on Washington to form an independent committee, somebody free from any pressures or any powers of the federal government. Maybe have the governor from each state in the union pick one position, a lawyer, and a non-position type person.
Well, let me ask you something. What can be presented to these governors or these politicians that's going to make them motivated enough to want to do this? What do we know today that hasn't come forth that can change this, turn this thing around?
Well, but just interviewing us right here, and quite a few other people, we're going over all the evidence again, getting all of the evidence that's left, which is probably not all available anymore, and having independent people free from the government to examine this, professionals in that field, whatever it is.
You're saying you don't feel the government over the last 30 years has not put forth an honest appraisal of what happened?
No, I don't think they have, and I never will think they have. I think they've been hoodwinking the American people since day one. Things have been suppressed, destroyed, and altered.
I think the American people have been... I think the American people have been sold a line of goods. Whether it's good or bad, it hasn't been proven. People can't realize that in this country that's supposedly free, that a United States president can be killed, murdered in front of millions of people just because he thinks differently than the rest of the government. He was a progressive man that came out with thoughts way ahead of his time. He was a man that felt that certain things should be done, even though he knew that it was against what a lot of his military advisors wanted to do, and specifically pertaining, you must remember the government isn't run totally by the people. The government is run by the important factions in the United States, big industry. During that time, Kennedy wanted to pull all of his Vietnamese, or he wanted to pull all the Army and the Air Forces out of Vietnam. He wanted to end that war because he felt that it was a war, it was a futile war, a war that they knew that they couldn't win. But he also realized that he was going across against a big important faction, the industry that runs this country. The amount of money needed, specifically at that time, it was a wartime. It was a prosperous time, but it was a wartime. For the companies at that time had everything tooled and dyed for the war. To stop and think, they would have to stop in midstream, retool everything back for peace. It would cost them a fortune, millions on top of millions. He wanted to give the blacks more freedom. He felt this was important. This was a land of the free, which during that time, you have to remember, the blacks didn't have the equality that they should have. This was a man that saw into the future, that bucked the system, that the system finally broke him. The American people today don't want to believe that this can happen here. But I feel that just from what we have gone over, we've proved that it did happen.
Let me ask you one question. Through your experiences that night at Bethesda, is there one thing that you know to be true that we've never been told before? Is there still something you know personally that we need to know that's going to shed light on all this?
Well, I think we've gone over this and over this and over this and showed there are discrepancies that have happened. I've showed discrepancies. I've showed different things by talking to different people. But you can only say something so long. You have to have somebody listen to you. It's like talking down a wind tunnel. Your voice will only carry so far, but if there's nobody down there to receive it, what's the use?
Well, these guys about touched all the bases as far as what I want to say. The American people have to realize there's a monstrous cover-up, and it permeated all levels of government, I think, and the military. I don't think that we'll ever know the truth. I hope we could, but then after 30 years, and now they're getting ready to release some records. I kind of cast a jaundiced eye at the record release, and the fact that I don't think we're going to really find anything new and exciting in there that's going to open up this again. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. But the American people have to realize they were sold bill of goods, like you said. And you just take, for instance, what goes on in our government, like the house banking scandal, for instance, where thousands and thousands of dollars of bad checks were written, where if you and I would do that, we'd go to jail. And these people, the senators and congressmen, are not even hardly touched by it.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, is there something that happened that evening in a personal recollection that you think puts things in perspective that shows us that we still don't know the whole truth 30 years later? Something that you feel has to be brought out?
Well, there's certain things that we were allowed to do, and there are certain things we weren't allowed to do. And one of the most troubling was the fact we weren't allowed to even touch the neck wound. It was just like it wasn't even there, and we weren't able to probe it. And I think evidence was lost forever right there.
Is it safe to say that all the testimony that came out in the following years from Dr. Humes, Boswell, and Fink don't really correspond to what all of you basically feel went on that evening, and it was very hard to make that judgment?
Well, I don't want to come out and call somebody a liar. They perceived something that I didn't perceive, especially with the neck wound and the back wound. It's still troubling, and they come out and in the JAMA article and say that there was a through-and-through wound from the back coming out the throat, which you didn't do. And so, like I said, the American people were sold a bill of goods, and they had no choice but to believe what they heard.
I don't know. It's difficult to cover something like this in a few statements. You try to approach something like this from a very objective point of view, but yet you have to be a little subjective in doing this. And the fact is that it also covers the emotional realm that you have. I was probably influenced, well, not probably, I did. I left the autopsy room feeling that the evidence that was found, the things that I saw, and the things that I was directly involved in doing would prove, and I honestly believe that night, or actually the next morning, that the conclusion was that President Kennedy was shot from the right front, basically at a 45-degree angle from center, and that the exit wound was in the anterior or posterior part of the parietal occipital area. I was actually shocked when I read in the paper these conclusions that he was shot from the rear, and then it became more and more ludicrous as the single bullet or the magic bullet theory came out. And at that point in time, it was almost so blatantly presented that I felt like the general American public should have taken offense to the way that it was presented to them. It was basically, I'll tell you what I want you to believe, and you'll believe it. No matter what evidence is presented to the contrary, you'll still believe what I tell you to. And I think that all along, this investigation on the part of anyone associated with the government has been a thing of, we'll pull an expert here to prove that you're wrong, and not really pulling experts that make independent decisions, but those that have ties to the government that may or may not be beneficial to themselves if they say the wrong things. I'm not sure that anyone has gone in to this testimony, or anyone has investigated this testimony without a bias to begin with. I have done interviews with two authors. I feel like that the things that I presented to them, the questions that I answered for them, for the most part have been put into their books. But I think, again, too, in this situation, these things that I saw were utilized in a manner to support a preconceived decision or premise on their part. I came here tonight because it's the first time that I really have had an opportunity to say what I saw, discuss in a basic discussion with the other people that were in the room that night. And hopefully this will be shown to the American public. And I hope that it will be presented to the American public in a sense that this is what we want to leave as our legacy as far as the knowledge that we have concerning this matter. Not as a situation of, well, we're going to make lots of money out of this or that type of situation. I feel that the general public, the American people, may have an idea, an empathy concerning this, but I think that they ought to realize that this is not just concerning the death of an individual. It's not concerning a murder or an assassination that reverts our country back to third world tactics to solve their political problems. I think what they should see this as an insult to their intelligence. I think that they should see this as a total disregard of their representatives in their government to their wishes, to their well-being, and the representation of the people as it should be. I don't put all of the blame into the politicians. I put the blame, a lot of the blame has to be shared by us, the people, the citizenry. I think that our attitudes, our empathies, our apathies toward voting, toward taking active parts in the government, has led this country to what we have today for government. It's a government that is not, and this is in my feeling, is not representative of the people. It is controlled by power, and primarily big money is the motivator. And in essence, the big money is not money as it is to us, the individual, but money is the power. And power is the ultimate goal. We need to not forget what happened. And I know that a lot of people have said to me, well, it's over with, let's forget it. But what they need to really understand, and what we, the American people, need to understand, is that this is not a single incident. This is something that is indicative of a very, very sick governmental system that we have that needs to be fixed. Now, I agree with Paul. I don't think that if someone came out tomorrow and told us the whole truth, we actually have no guidelines, nothing to compare this to. We probably would still be skeptical. Among myself, I probably would, unless it correlated with some of the things that I saw at the autopsy. I have no direct knowledge of anything prior to that autopsy or after that autopsy. Anything else that I would say concerning how it happened, why it happened, things of that nature, I would have to deduce from the political atmosphere at that point in time, my own opinions, and I think that in something of this matter, that would be conjecture on my part. I, like everyone else, have my opinions. I feel like I have a right to those opinions, but I do not feel like that I want to express those and possibly influence anyone else. I think that what I saw, what I have stated, the things that we all here have brought to the public, and we, as a group, pretty well collaborate each other. There's some minor differences. I think that is the way that we look at things. Paul and I were the two corpsmen that were involved primarily in the autopsy itself. He and I have some questions that I think that we have resolved, and it was a matter of perspective. I think it was a matter of how I looked at things and my general perception and Paul's, but I think that what Paul saw and what I saw are the same thing, exactly the same thing. I think that what the other people here saw, you know, the photographs, the x-rays, the perception of what was going on in that room at that point in time, we all at different times and independently of each other have stated these types of things. The animosities, the tension, the pressures that were involved. And I would like to close this by saying one thing. We have had so many truths, quote, and I say that with tongue in cheek, published by so-called experts, and then now we have a medical association who is saying definitely this did exist and this did not exist for two physicians. And my question is, if Dr. Humes and Dr. Boswell really wanted to put this thing to rest, why did they not themselves personally address the American people? Why do you go to an association that has a credibility gap with the general public to begin with? JAMA is not God. Their publication, though they may think it is the Bible of medicine, it is not. And there are physicians out there that probably have the same doubts that we have and the general public has. Do not try to influence us by throwing things at the general public and myself that at one time in my life I respected. I think the news media needs to be more responsive to the general public, and I think they need to be more responsible to reporting the facts and reporting the news as it is without embellishment or attempts to persuade. Control is power, and the news media has learned this. If they were true journalists and if they were truly involved in an organization that was to purely feed news to the general public, to improve the public's well-being and so forth, then then they would come out and report these things as they are. They would not try to influence the decision of the American public. This is a thing that occurs in third world countries, in controlled countries that we have seen in the past, where the news media is used to influence, control, and so forth. In this country, I have to believe that we're still free and that we still have a choice. Because if we do not, then, you know, where do we go from here? So as the American people, the people are the only thing that can keep us alive. I'm not saying that should be alive because we want to prosecute somebody for the murder of John Kennedy or the assassination of John Kennedy. I'm saying keep it alive in your mind. The next time you go to vote, remember what I say and think about it, and then think about who you're voting. The next time you say that there are no candidates out there worthy of my vote, think about what that means also. The next time one of your candidates has a minor discretion or indiscretion, remember that also. Replace them. Let's gain our country back. And the way that we do that is through our politicians. The other alternative is not acceptable.
What I'd like to do is, I have one last very important question to pose to each one of you that we'll finish this out. Well, we're running out of tape, so we'll put one more in. It's something that you can give a very brief answer, but it relates to the Journal of the AMA and everything that we've dealt with so far tonight. I'd like to get at you and start to take this torch, if you may, and go forth with it. Are we all set?
Yeah.
Final question. Let's start with by two bullets fired, both from behind, by a single gunman, and basically it struck him. And that was recently substantiated by the Journal of the AMA on May 27, 1992, in their interviews with Dr. Jones and Boswell. In your personal opinion, do you agree with the statement that John F. Kennedy was killed by just two shots fired from a single gunman from behind?
No, I do not. One, I personally don't think there would be enough time.
But just from
the
I'm dealing
damage.
with, not personal, not
Okay.
interrupting. I don't want to deal with personal opinion on
Okay.
all these other variables.
Okay.
Just from what all of you
Well-
dealt with, because in essence, to take this back for just a second, the best evidence the government has, and Journal of the AMA has, in dealing with Dr. Hughes and Boswell, is what all of you were involved in doing that night. We're getting the other side. We've heard from Hughes, Boswell, and Fink. I want to hear from the other members who were in that
Okay.
autopsy room. The best evidence that came out of what you all did that evening, that we've been told as the American public, is that only two shots struck President Kennedy, and that's what killed him. Based on your own personal recollections of your hands-on involvement, whatever specific areas you were in, can you relate to that question and tell the public now, is what we're told as of 1993 the truth?
No, I don't think it was. Mostly due to the type of wounds that President Kennedy sustained, especially the gaping head wound.
So you do not agree with...
No, I do not agree with Warren Commission or JAMA.
regarding that
Right.
Same, I don't agree also, simply because of the big gaping head wound. You're not going to get a wound like that with one shot. And to have fracture lines like that, it's almost physically impossible. You have force pressure on one end, force pressure on the other end. So it has to be, basic physics will tell you, two opposites have to move one way or another. You got force going one way, the bone's going to go the opposite direction. And it shows just in the films.
You do not agree with...
I totally
what
don't
the
agree.
AMA told us.
Right. And specifically, I saw the one wound in the neck that had bullet fragments. which they never even bothered to probe. So that tells you in itself, there's a discrepancy there.
You didn't deal with anyone specifically, but if you have a personal opinion on the general.
Well, the impression I had.
No, I don't agree with the JAMA article at all. I consider it a bunch of hearsay, especially of what I saw physically in that morgue that night. I'm sure that he was hit approximately 4 times, not twice from the back. I think he was hit from the back, but I think he was hit from the side of the head too.
I feel basically the same way Paul does. I don't believe it. From the evidence or what I saw that night, I also think he was shot or hit at least 4 times. Once, if Dr. Perry again is correct, I have no reason to doubt him. Once in the neck, once in the back, and twice in the head. I can't believe anything else. The theories that were proposed for the wounds that we dealt with just really don't correlate, are not even realistically correlated with what we saw. So I have to say no, I don't. I think it was a political motivation designed to qualm some of the excitement or that had been generated by a couple of previous statements in the general public. Or maybe a film or, the other things that occurred prior to this. I think it was an attempt by the government to belittle or reduce the impression of maybe the JFK movie that was recently produced, and maybe some other information that had been released to the public.
Well, I hope you feel your stories have been brought out today and the way you wanted them told. And I think we've covered a lot of bases. And hopefully this is all going to mean something somewhere down the road. But at least I think we gave an honest appraisal of what you recollect. And certainly getting together as a group is certainly a first. And hopefully that has an impact on everything we've been told up to this point. And maybe, as you said, something will come out now in the next year or two, maybe even accidentally, that will reflect and coordinate with what all of you have said today. They'll make more sense of all this. But in any case, I appreciate you all coming in at probably personal inconvenience to do this. And I hope it does have some importance for the American public sometime in the future. I thank you very much.
Oh, we're not finished yet. Hold on.
National correspondent for the Journal of the American Medical Association. He has reported on medicine for 25 years. Dr. Lundberg will open with brief remarks. Mr. Brio also will have a short statement. We will then distribute press kits and open the floor for questions after giving you a few minutes to review the materials. Dr. Lundberg?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mattel. On November 22nd, 1963, President John Fitzgerald Kennedy was killed by an assassin's bullets. Unfortunately, our country has still not laid to rest the circumstances of that assassination. Fueling the conspiracy theorists has been the original decision by our government to keep the records and materials locked in the National Archives for many decades, unavailable for public scrutiny. Plus the voluntary non-availability of the people who best knew the truth to present their findings to the public and the news media. This latter prolonged self-imposed silence is now over. Over the past 6 weeks, the Journal of the American Medical Association, specifically Dennis Brio and I, have conducted interviews with Dr. James J. Humes and Dr. J. Thornton Boswell, the Kennedy autopsy pathologists, about all aspects of the autopsy circumstances and findings. In addition, Mr. Brio has interviewed Dr. Earl Rose, the Dallas forensic pathologist, Dr. Pepper Jenkins, the anesthesiologist who ventilated the president's lungs, Dr. Charles J. Carrico, the first surgeon to treat President Kennedy, Dr. Charles Baxter, another Dallas surgeon who treated the president, and Dr. Malcolm Perry, the surgeon who performed the tracheostomy. The findings of these interviews with these respected physicians most involved in the emergency care of President in Dallas and the post-mortem examination in Bethesda, Maryland, are carefully documented in 14 pages of journalism in the May 27, 1992 issue of JAMA. This special 11,000-word report was written by Mr. Brio. The physicians agreed to speak with JAMA because it is a respected medical publication. Most had declined interviews for 28 years, nearly 29. Doctors Humes and Boswell specified that they wanted the report to be in the worldwide medical literature, in which, of course, JAMA is premier. They state that these JAMA articles are their story and that they do not plan to give further interviews. Based upon solid, unequivocal forensic evidence as reported by Mr. Brio in the May 27 JAMA, I can state without concern or question my agreement with Doctors Humes and Boswell that President Kennedy was struck and killed by 2 and only 2 bullets fired from one high-velocity rifle. The first bullet entered the back of the neck and exited the front of the throat. The abrasion collar of the skin at the back of the neck is diagnostic of a wound of entrance. The second bullet entered the back of the head and exploded the right side of the head, destroying the brain with a surely lethal wound. The inward beveling of the bone at the back of the skull and the outward beveling at the front is diagnostic of the direction of the bullet's path. Thus, both bullets struck from behind. No other bullets struck the president. A single assassin fired both bullets. The eyewitness accounts and the scientific forensic evidence are indisputable. Here are further specific points. The body was illegally moved after death from Dallas to Bethesda over the strong protests of Dr. Earl Rose, the responsible Dallas pathologist and medical examiner. Murder, of course, is a state crime. The pathologists in Bethesda were, as military physicians, professionally in charge of the autopsy and made their findings independent of government interference and in good faith as medical professionals. The body was received in Bethesda in a bronze casket, not in a body bag. There is no evidence that anyone altered the state of the body between the Dallas trauma room and the autopsy room. Specifically, the tracheostomy site was at autopsy as it was at death. There was no conspiracy as regards the autopsy, its findings, or its report. The autopsy findings cannot state which one person fired the rifle, whether there were other shots that missed, or whether Lee Harvey Oswald worked with the New Orleans mob or the CIA or Fidel Castro or anybody else. You can't tell that from the autopsy. The movie JFK is primarily skillful film fiction, but is a grave insult to the military physicians involved as well as to pathologists in this country in general, to Navy medicine, and a whole lot of other innocent people as well. The recent Crenshaw book, called JFK, A Conspiracy of Silence, is a sad fabrication based upon unsubstantiated allegations. In my opinion, the best explanations for the motivation of the myriad conspiracy theorists are 4 Ps: paranoia, desire for personal recognition, public visibility, and profit, the 4 Ps. We add our voices to those who petition the government to open the archives to serious study and to work with the National Museum of Health and Medicine at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology in Washington to place the relevant Kennedy materials on permanent display near those of President Lincoln for full viewing by any and everyone. We hope that this presentation today and Mr. Brio's 2 JAMA articles will help to calm the ardor of the honest conspiracy theorists who have simply not had access to the facts. We further hope that an entire generation that has been fed docu-fiction on this matter, as if it were truth, will no longer be misled. Thank you very much. Mr. Brio's statement?
Dr. Lundberg has covered well the essential findings of fact. I will only add why we have pursued this story for so long. For years, the public has been hearing from people who were not in Trauma Room 1 in Dallas and were not in the autopsy room in Bethesda, and yet who have claimed to know what must have happened during the medical care of President Kennedy. What we now have are the reports of the physicians who were on the scene, the physicians who carried the primary hands-on responsibility to first try to save the president's life and then, only hours later, to determine the cause of death. We now have the facts about these 2 critical events in the words of the only people who know those facts, those very facts that the conspiracy theorists have chosen to ignore. It has been said that the defamers of the truth can only be confronted and defeated by the truth. This special report is JAMA's attempt to confront the defamers of the truth. Thank you.
We'll distribute the